'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. 'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, listening to Jams and Tea.
Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today we are coming at you with not one, not two, but three albums we are going to cover today. We are going to be covering Megan Thee Stallion's new release, Good News. We are going to be covering the new album by Liturgy, which is Origin of the Alimonies, as well as KG by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And on today's album club, we are going to be discussing The Mollusk by Ween. And yeah, that's what we got come for you, recording on this lovely, wonderful Black Friday. I hope everyone has had a lovely Thanksgiving. And don't leave your homes. Don't go shop. Stay inside.
Listen to music. Watch movies.
Listen to music. Yeah. Don't be a nerd.
Order online. Preferably not through Amazon, but even then, that's better than going to stores and possibly killing people.
Yep.
That is
sure is.
Very true.
Much.
All right, well, shall we get stuck into our opening segment? Then we've got a lot to get through today, so let's try and keep it brisk. Jake, do you want to talk about anything in particular that you have been listening to in the past 7 days?
First of all, I listened to yesterday. My sole Thanksgiving listen went to A Weekend in the City by Block Party. And I didn't have any expectations for this album, just because, the discourse around Block Party is, silent alarm, good, rest mid. So, but I have it on good authority that every album of theirs other than one is actually pretty good. So I was like, okay. And I went to it, and I was like, all right, let's do this. And honestly, really, really liked it. Damn fine album. I think, the people who would compare it to Silent Alarm, it's just how, if you compare one band's output to their sole masterpiece, it's come on, kind of selling them a little bit short, aren't you? It's just not very fair. It's got kind of a more nocturnal vibe. They lean into more of their electronic elements. It's a very consistent listen. It's a very enjoyable album. I don't know what people's gripe with that record in comparison to Silent Alarm are, because I do think it is genuinely quite great.
Well, it's like the thing where a journalist asked Joseph Heller why he hasn't written a book as good as Catch-22, and he said, "Well, who has?"
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just it's a shitty thing to fucking ask somebody, too.
Yeah, honestly.
Why haven't you done this thing again? Why aren't you a genius that can replicate success? Fuck you.
It's like, Francis Ford Coppola, why have you never made a film as good as Apocalypse Now afterwards? We're like, well, maybe because I almost killed people trying to do so the first time.
like many people. I listened to, this will be notable for at least two people in the podcast. I gave my first listen to Illinois by Sufjan Stevens.
Where is he? Where's the boy? Where's the boy?
What a great fucking album.
I'm so glad you think it's great, because I always thought in the back of my mind that that would be a record that you would just really find an attachment to.
I was just I need for some reason I'm just I haven't listened to any of Sufjan's other stuff other than The Ascension, so I should fucking fix that. And I had just I've been working a lot this week, and I had re-listened to your all's Sufjan podcast because it's a great episode. And I was just of the ones I wanted to go back and listen to what you all had to say about them and be which one should I go for? And I went for that one, and it was great. It was fantastic. I'm nowhere near done listening to it, just because it's such a dense fucking record. It's such an epic. It's so opulent, but oh my god. There's songs like John Wayne Gacy Jr. What a fucking song.
What a man.
Predatory Wasp.
What a guy.
That song is
Predatory Wasp is my favorite Sufjan song.
I was going to say that might be. It's in contention for mine. But yeah, great record. Very opulent indie folk kind of thing. I highly recommend that to pretty much anybody. If you like Well, I can't even say if you like Carrie and Lowell just because they're miles apart. It's like
Yeah.
night and day, really. But you know, if you want to see Sufjan's creativity channeled into something a bit more, I guess, it feels more like a creative endeavor and less like, you know, a raw
Yeah, I mean-
distillation of human pain.
Yeah, I mean,
mean,
it's
like,
just a
maybe
lot
if you-
more grand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you
Scope.
like early Arcade Fire, maybe.
They definitely emerge
Yeah.
from the same kind of
Fair enough.
like they're both like early Arcade Fire and Illinois are both classics of 2000s indie rock,
Mm.
and they are
Uh,
indispensable records.
Oh yeah. I also
One
listened
is
to...
better than the other.
Oh.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I gave a
Any chance to dunk on Arcade Fire.
That's also fair.
I have no strong feelings on either. I don't know why I'm shit stirred.
I gave a re-listen to one of my favorite albums that I haven't listened to in a very long time because I have it on vinyl, and that's Billy Joel's "The Stranger." Spectacular record. It's just one of those albums. It's like Fleetwood Mac's "Rumors," where it's just like it's hit after hit after hit after hit, and it just you know,
Anthony
don't stop.
works at the grocery store,
Saving his
saving
pennies for
his
someday.
pennies for someday.
God, now I'm about to like break into the fucking melody. It's so good. Scenes from an Italian Restaurant is one of the like best fucking songs.
Oh, I love
ever.
that Bergman film.
What else
Yeah.
have you listened
Next,
to?
I've listened to this nearly every day just because it's a much shorter listen and because it came out very recently. Very predictably, Phoebe Bridgers released a Christmas EP of 4 songs that I have been playing multiple times every single day. She covers Merle Haggard's "If We Make It Through December," which is an outstanding cover. She also does a brief little snippet of "Silent Night." She does, oh, what the fuck is the... "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" is the last song, but the notable standout for me is an original song just entitled "Christmas Song" by her, which is one of her best songs. It's a terrific, terrific tune. Love it to death. Gets you in the Christmas spirit.
I think she released that as a single around this time last year.
That would not surprise me if she like compiled it into an EP, just because the proceeds of the EP are going to help fight homelessness. So, you know, give that a look and maybe stop on Bandcamp and pick that up and you know, give your money to a good cause. I also listened to
Don't start. Don't start
I
with
listened to
this.
something that's going to be it's sort of foreshadowing a later episode that we do soon-ish. And that is Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins. And all I will say on that is that it's really, really good. Like...
Hot takes.
Really, really good. I mean, I also listened to Adore, but I want to elaborate my opinions more on the episode. And last but not least, I was going to talk about an album, but I know that Tyler and Morgan will also have something to say about it, so I'll skip over that and just say I re-listened to Go Farther in Lightness by Gang of Youths. And finally gave it the 10 out of 10 that it deserves.
Aye.
Yeah, and I fell apart while at work. It was great. I was listening to The Heart Is a Muscle, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Been a fun week working retail.
Hell is a place where August has to listen to all of us talk about Punisher and Go Farther and Lightness on repeat. Or it's a place where we have to listen to him talk about those 2 records on repeat.
Yeah.
No,
The
that's true.
duality of man.
August is
Yeah.
just so nice and encouraging that he would like be happy. Well, I don't know about happy, but like he would be perfectly fine just listening to us talk about things we love for a while. The same cannot be said for August talking about things he hates to us.
Yeah,
That's a different story altogether.
Yes. But anyway, speaking of August, what
okay.
have you been listening to this week?
So this is kind of cover this week and last week because obviously I wasn't here, but that aside, one thing was Rush's Roll the Bones.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The real album that exists.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
but
think
it's definitely the worst Rush album.
I don't know.
Yes, but
Can I really excuse the part where Geddy Lee raps on that album?
yes, because it's amazing.
I mean, that's one way to put it.
Tell me that doesn't bring if that doesn't bring you some kind of joy, like then you're
No,
dead
don't
inside.
get me wrong. It brings me joy, but it's like joy fused with secondhand embarrassment.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's like watching Mother of Tears. I get it. Right.
A bit.
The same. I
Yeah.
believe, by the way, that Geddy was not originally supposed to rap that they originally actually had a rapper signed on to do it, but couldn't.
No,
I
they
believe. Oh,
they
it's
never
not?
planned for that. No.
Oh, wow, that's even worse.
Yeah. Wow. How embarrassing.
So
Continue.
I haven't heard this album, this particular Rush album, but I just looked it up, and there's a track that's literally called "Where's My Thing?" parentheses part
Yeah.
4 quote.
Well, that's one of the
Gangster
best-
Boats,
It's
quote.
one of the best tracks, and
Yep.
it's called "Where's
Easily.
My Thing."
No, it's called "Where's My
Reverse
Thing?"
Cuomo
parentheses
type beat.
part 4 Gangster
Oh
and
my
Boats
God.
trilogy and parentheses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Title.
Okay.
Isn't Bravado on that album? Yes, it is.
Yes.
That's a very good song. Every Rush album has at least one great song.
Yeah. I won't disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so continuing on, I listened to an album from a band I've always been meaning to get to because of their vast, diverse discography, that being a Weird Exits by the OCs. I thought that was a very engaging kind of a kraut rocky, garage rocky album. It's really fun. Very King Gizzard, I would say.
Yep.
In
Yeah.
that they've got a lot of that same kind of apocalyptic dread kind of sheened with this kind of heavy amount of just like sugar rush fun. It's a really good album. I think King Gizzard fans, Saoirse in particular, would enjoy it. Another thing was Slift's Uman, which was a very exciting, compelling, like just record with a huge, just massive scale. It's really fun. I actually got my dad to listen to that, and he said it was his favorite album of the year so far.
Oh,
It's
fuck yeah, I'm
really,
responsible for
really
August's
good.
dad's
Yeah.
favorite album of the year. Let's fucking go.
Yeah. No, you helped with that.
I'm honored. So glad you checked that out. Cool.
Yeah, no, it's it seemed like it would be my thing, and
Very
shock
happy
of
it
all
was.
shocks, it was. Another thing I listened to was Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. I finally got to it. I think the production isn't that great, honestly. I feel a lot of what it's doing is like it feels a lot like everyone gets their turn to be the loudest in the mix of every single song, and it can feel
That's the Steve Albini 80s
Yeah.
Steve Albini thing, and it's like you either dig that sound or it holds you at a distance.
And I've liked some of his stuff in the past before, but it did throw me off a good bit with listening to this. But
I think that production style works better on something like PJ Harvey's Rid of Me, which has a very similar sound, but I think it does the songs justice. The dynamic, the way things are kind of arranged in this kind of dynamic extremes is much better suited to that record. But
I would not be surprised. I'd have to check that out though. But still though, I think it's a very good album. It's got a bunch of great Pixies songs on it, like Where Is My Mind, Bone Machine, among others. It's still quite good. Just of the three I've heard from them, my least favorite, but I know that position will not last if I listen to anything else they've made. Final thing for this week is something Saoirse put into our
Hello.
Saoirse told me was one of the worst albums of the
Oh,
year.
yes.
In fact, her
Oh yes.
least favorite currently All-time lows, Wake Up Sunshine.
It's so
That's
bad.
What an awful album to come back to. When I sit
It's-
back down, I hear All Time Low, and I'm like, oh no.
It's just 15 tracks of bullshit.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
bullshit. There's not a good or original idea on there. It's just it's like if I was forced to imagine this record, it would sound like that.
Do you know what it's
just awful.
like? Do you know what it's like? I came across this week a song that an Italian singer had written, and he intentionally spoke gibberish.
Oh,
but
yeah.
designed to sound like American words. It's like a goof to prove that.
Right. Yeah. I know this
yeah.
song.
It's like as a goof to prove that Italians will listen to anything American. It worked. It was a hit. But it's like someone did that. But it's like we are gonna write an album that is genetically designed to sound like an all-time low record with absolutely nothing in it.
Yeah, no, I listened to it like not even a full day ago, and I couldn't hum a single song on here. It's all just bullshit. So horrible. One of the worst things I've heard all year. That's all.
When you say it's all-time low's worst record, that says quite a lot.
I hate All Time Low just because it's like, your fucking low-hanging fruit-ass band title. Don't make me do this to you. I'm better than that.
And that's why I didn't make that joke once, because
Yeah, you're better than that, August.
they don't deserve it. They're not.
Nope.
They're not worth it.
Nope.
Quite.
Not at all.
They all-time blow. All right, social.
That's better. That's a better joke.
August, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, those were my 5.
Okay. Saoirse, we'll jump to you then. What have you been
Thank
listening
you.
to this week?
So we have a mutual that we all know on Twitter whose album of the year is called Manger on McNichols by Baldy James and Sterling Tolls. And it's a hip hop project. And I listened to it and I didn't vibe with everything, but it is super, super interesting and like sonically fascinating. And it draws samples from kind of everywhere. And it puts together these super, like, very sparse but orchestral and strange and alienating soundscapes while singing these pretty sort of quite brutal and honest lyrics. And I can see why it could be someone's album of the year. I just, I wasn't quite, not quite my tempo,
I respect it, but it ain't me.
Well, I still gave it an 8. Like, I think it's really, really good. But sure. But I also listened to Phoebe's new EP. I listened to Tallahassee again, which is quickly becoming my comfort record. It's like every time I listen to it, there is just a new lyric I find astonishingly good. And also I listened to Script of the Bridge by the Chameleons. It's a really, really good post-punk album. I just loved it. It was great.
Well, that's lovely.
Wonderful. As for what I listened to this week, I have a pretty short segment too. I have gone back through the not the entire discography because that would be absurd, but some of the records of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who we're going to be briefly discussing today. They're a good band. I've never been wowed by them in the way that a lot of other people are. I think that their best record is that I've heard anyway is I'm in Your Mind Fuzz, but I also
That's also my favorite one.
Well, that's good. That's reassuring to me. I also revisited Flying Microtonal Banana, which is probably my second favorite one of theirs. I really dig that record, and it's got obviously a very key relationship with the one we're going to be discussing today, which I'll get into. I also re-listened to I didn't re-listen to Not a God Infinity. I should have done that though. I like that album quite a bit.
I
But
believe you're trying to get out Infest the Rat's
yeah,
Nest.
I first listened to Infest the Rat's Nest, which I thought also was quite good. I had heard that it was their kind of thrash metal album going into it, and so you can definitely see that influence on display. It didn't quite consistently blow me away in the way that I hoped that kind of supposed sonic reinvention would, but they wore it reasonably well. There are some really good highlights on it, especially the first half of the record. So yeah, it proves to be yet another eminently solid King Gizzard record. I also listened to, I finally got around to listening to Matt Berninger of the Nationals solo record, which he recorded with Booker T. Jones. Serpentine Prison, it's called. So if you're a fan of the National, or if you're a fan of Matt Berninger's singing and writing style, this will be for you. It's much more slow paced. Some might even say sleepy at points. It's certainly not going to be for everyone, but there is a kind of lushness to the arrangements that I think stops it from being a failure or a boring record. And I found myself, when I listened to it the second time, because I listened to it twice in a row, the second time I found the songs kind of getting under my skin in a way that I really liked. It's a very subtle and beautiful record. It's perfect for just kind of like throwing on and vibing to, even though I kind of hate that word. It's still like, it's one of those words that I kind of hate, and yet it often seems to be appropriate. But yeah, so that was, I think quite a good record that I understandably getting slept on a bit, but I definitely would recommend spending time with it if you're into that sort of thing. I listened to one of the biggest disappointments of this entire year. Glass Animals, Dreamland. So for those of you who don't know who Glass Animals are, they're kind of this indie pop band that kind of made waves in sort of alty indie poppy circles in the middle of this decade, and they put out a great album in 2016, I think, called How to Be a Human Being, that had some quite successful singles on it. It's kind of very sugary, but also kind of quite eccentric and weird and quirky kind of indie pop record that has a lot of really strong hooks and vocal melodies, and it's just a really addictive and sugary and fun record. And so this new record, Dreamland, is the follow-up to that, and it's bad.
It's bad.
It's so bad, you guys.
It's so bad. like bad.
It's
like not even disappointing.
It's
no.
Bad. So I've described to you this sugary indie pop band, and what they're doing here is they're making clubby trap influenced, vaguely hip hoppy, not consistently though. There's definitely shades of that poppier sound, but it's there's a song that has a which rapper is it? That sounds so bad that I don't remember which rapper it is. There's a
Big
song.
Sean.
No, it's a great famous rapper that we all love, and I'm forgetting who it is because this album
Mike
just
Eagle or something.
Danny Brown.
This album just absolutely vacated my brain, and I can't remember who it is.
LP.
It's Denzel Curry. He has a feature.
No!
He's a feature on this record, and it's handily the most. It's funny that I say this now because I didn't remember his name, but his feature is the most memorable thing about this album.
Oh dear!
It's just so dull, and the songs are so bad, and there's just, when it's not entirely boring, it's frequently just cringe-inducingly bad. With songs like Melon and the Coconut and Space Ghost, Coast to Coast.
Wait, like the show?
Yes, apparently.
Hi.
And also the worst song on the album, Waterfalls Coming Out Your Mouth.
What?
So yeah, look, those are just the song titles. You really have to hear some of this shit.
Lisa Left Eye Lopez.
I was gonna say,
turning in her
you're
grave.
telling me I need to listen to this right now.
It's really not that interesting in how bad it is. It's just bad.
Come on.
Yeah, it's a shame because I did think they were a good band and they had potential to
It's
become
actually
a great
something
one.
I've noticed in the last 5 years is a lot of successful rock bands taking a hard, or like indie rock bands or indie bands taking a hard like left turn into like hardcore pop, and it just, unless you're Tegan and Sarah, it always sucks.
Well, what happens is like Glass Animals got a tiny bit of crossover appeal with some of the singles on their last record. Like they were quite, they did quite well. And so it just kind of seemed like a logical extension to go like fully embrace that. But it's just a bad record. That's all that needs to be said. What else? Oh yeah, okay. So I left this till last. The best record I've heard in the last 7 days, handily, one of the best records of this year. Death metal band Ulcerate.
Finally.
Kiwi death metal band Ulcerate, and their new record Stare Into Death and Be Still. My favorite album cover of the year as well. Yeah, I know that Jake and Morgan also listened to it. It's really good. Like it's just really hard hitting. It's dense and intense and throttling death metal. It's also got like this a really strong melodic center to it as well, so it's not too unfriendly, even though it is like in terms of the production style it's quite
enveloping.
If you're not necessarily familiar with these kinds of sounds, you'll probably find it quite overwhelming and difficult to process, but if you are, then it's just an absolutely rich and really engaging record that I think never flags, despite the fact that it's such an intense and long-winded experience. Title track is just one of the best pieces of music of the entire year. And it's very nice and affirming to have my feelings on this supported by the real metal experts on this pod. It's just great. It's great stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now that's what I call a key win.
Morgan, it is your turn to talk about what you've been listening to this week.
First of all, I'll start with first listens I did this week, because I did actually listen to some albums for the first time, not for the podcast. First being the debut self-titled release of English singer-songwriter, Americana artist by the name of Jade Bird.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's very good. It's sort of a nice change of pace from like the sort of indie sad girl scene, because you look at that album cover and you're like, oh, that's exactly what this is going to be. And then it's just kind of fun Americana rock influenced tunes with a ballad or two thrown in, and it's just very solid. Her voice is incredible. That's easily its biggest selling point, I think. And I can only imagine she has room to grow in the future. So that's definitely a name to be having in the back of your mind.
It's quite short too, so
yeah. Less short is the most recent Ulcerate album, Stare Into Death and Be Still. And were it not for the fact that Deftones happened to release an album this year, this would be the best metal record, hands down. God. The power this has. It's
tasty. It's got some tasty jams.
It do almost exclusively. It's just very, very good. If you happen to be a fan of something like Blackwater Park, they don't necessarily sound similar, but I think if you like Blackwater Park, you're going to very much like Ulcerate. After that, I listened to Ween's Quebec. Quebec by Ween. That's very good. Not a bajillion % my thing. I found it to be a little inconsistent in the ways that I connected with it, almost on a song-by-song basis.
Yeah, I would imagine that there would be certain songs on it that really, really would be your thing. But maybe not the whole thing. Like the opener, for example, that's like
transdermal celebration.
Oh. spectacular.
Mm.
But then right before that, coming off of a song named Zoloft, the drug that I am on, that which just was disappointing because of that, because of how little I vibed with that at all.
That is a
Um,
shame, but never mind.
What did you think of the Fact Jam?
That was a bit that went on a little bit too long.
Yeah, that's the only song on the album that I really just don't care for.
It's like, oh, this is funny and wacky, and it's still going. Okay, we're not done with this yet. Can we move on?
And then they do that 4 times.
Yeah.
But the last 2 songs are excellent. So
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
2 of my favorites.
no big complaints from me. Oh, excuse me. I ate so much food so fast. Finally,
Morgan's just gonna be like, the new Megan Thee Stallion. Bleh!
I mean, as is my brand. Finally, a re-listen. Re-listened to Nujabes Modal Soul, and like I listen to it, like all of you.
I've never heard a Nujabes record.
Yeah,
I cannot. There's not a single person here who would not love it.
No, Jake, I suspect you
Like-
might even love it more than Morgan, if that's possible.
Oh.
I don't know about that.
Where should I start?
Modal Soul.
Okay.
There's really no bad place to start. The guy only had 3 albums. But like, do you like jazz? Do you like hip hop?
Yes.
Listen to it.
Oh, point taken.
Good. I cannot stress enough. All of you, listen to it, or I will beat you.
I believe you.
Yeah, that's about all I have.
Okay.
All right.
And
Well,
with that,
First
Let us
on the
move
list,
on.
what is it?
Megan Thee Stallion is first on the list.
Ah,
Megan
Christ.
Thee-
Good news.
Ah, shit.
Okay, so
Ah.
allow me to set
Well,
the scene.
Please
Give a
do.
context, because
But are we going to answer the question of, is this really good news?
No,
because that's-
next question.
No.
Too easy. Okay, so Megan Thee Stallion has had a banner year in terms of popular music, and she's a really interesting artist as a figure, as a cultural figure, in the sense that she kind of seems to represent. She's not the first, but she represents kind of like a new wave of female figures in hip hop who are kind of
Horny.
raunchy and really aggressive in style. Obviously,
Off the backs of people like City Girls, who feature on her record.
yeah, obviously her kind of place in popular music owes a lot to figures like Nicki Minaj and even Cardi B, who
Mm-hmm.
is particularly relevant because the song of the year in terms of popular music, the song that has basically dominated 2020 is WAP. And that is no small part due to Megan. Megan is one of the most technically gifted female rappers in popular music at the moment. I mean, not that there's a whole heck of a lot of competition, really, unfortunately, but the figures who are out there are Megan owes a lot to them, and there are kind of a new wave of rappers coming in who are going to owe a lot to Megan as well. And in terms of like releases, she's had, this is supposedly her debut record, but it's really not. She put out a record last year, I think, called
Fever?
it's called
Something?
Fever, yeah. That is a kind of officially a mixtape, but it's not really. It's all label fuckery stuff, and I
Yeah.
believe that there is more than a touch of that behind some of the decision making in terms of the structuring and release of this record as well.
Yeah.
That I'll touch on a little bit, but essentially. Not to take away from Megan's artistic drive and her craftsmanship as a creator, but this very much feels like a studio rush job in the wake of the mammoth success of WAP. And so we have this album to kind of capitalize on that, to capitalize on Megan's very sudden shift from generally well-known and popular figure. Of course, she had one of the biggest songs in hip-hop of last year, Hot Girl Summer, and so this was a kind of moment where she exploded from being kind of reasonably well-known to being kind of like a central figure in popular music, or at least on the verge of becoming one. And so yeah, we have good news now. The album to kind of the victory lap, supposedly. And it's fine. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, and it kind of just levels out. For me anyway. I think one of the chief complaints that I have about this record is that I find the production to be kind of uninspired. It feels quite flat. Evidently, a lot of the ways that this is produced is like the producer's job is to just create a kind of bouncy and straightforward platform for Megan to spit over. And basically you do get that, but at the same time it's like some of the beats here feel really kind of dull and safe, and even stock. The soul sample on the track Circles feels flat and unadorned, even though that is one of the better songs on the record. The record does open quite definitively and defiantly with Shots Fired, which acknowledges front and center one of the biggest news stories of the year in the music world that concerns her, which is the fact that she was shot by Tory Lanez a few months ago. Something which has, arguably, well, inarguably, unfairly dominated a lot of the discourse around her, just at a point where she was becoming big off the back of her music. Now all of a sudden people are talking about her with regards to her being shot, and that has come to kind of dominate a lot of the narrative around her. And so she kind of wants to get it out of the way, acknowledge it up front on the first song, and she does a really creditable job. It's not an amazing track, I don't think, but there's a real fire to it that's understandably feels quite like she needs to kind of get this out and say fuck you in the most efficient way possible. And she does a decent job of it on that song. And then basically the rest of the record is fuck jams, dedicated to talking about
fucking
that old past
the WAP in question.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, real hardcore shit, plenty of it. But then you have some strange decisions with regards to how she goes about doing this in terms of like the crafting of the songs. The song Cry Baby immediately leaps to mind as one of the most questionable and strangely uncomfortable. Like I'm not saying, but this is the thing, like Megan's whole ethos is like I've read interviews with her where she's talked about how this notion of women being upfront about sex in popular music makes men uncomfortable and has kind of been frowned upon for a long time, and or at least has kind of led to not getting that sort of white mainstream popularity. It's led to you kind of being sidelined as a sort of a more kind of niche artist. And so what Megan is doing is kind of defiantly, she's part of a wave that's defiantly saying, no, fuck you. These songs are going to be big and they're going to be explicit. And WAP is kind of the apotheosis of that. So you get more of her doing that on this record, but I want to make clear that my objections to the songs are not on the basis of the fact that she's being raunchy and explicit. I think that a lot of the bars that she has are that are explicitly about sex are actually not all. There are definitely some that miss, but some of them are quite funny. My favorite lyric on the record being invest in this pussy boy, support black business.
Yeah, that line's, I had that written down too.
Which is a great bar. But anyway, back to the song Cry Baby. I don't know what goes through your mind when you put like samples of an actual baby sounds on a song like this.
Why is this a thing this year?
It's not. and it's like and
it features Da Baby.
Da Baby, of course, who is another, like it or not, is another huge artist in mainstream hip hop.
And I don't like it.
Yeah, no.
So yeah,
Not a fan.
It's and you know, and Megan also throws in these kind of where ad libs on the track, which are just hilariously bad. And look, she does have some good bars, as I said. She also has bars like bitches thinking they the shit when they really toilet water.
Yeah.
And that's on the song Do It on the Top. And this was the moment in the record, the first of many moments in the record, where I was reminded of the artist Cupcake, who, if you're not familiar with, is a kind of underground rapper who sort of came up because she wrote these very kind of incredibly raunchy and explicit songs about like sex. But what was more notable about Cupcake was the fact that she's just incredibly talented and just she spits fire. And she's actually made an effort. She hasn't released an album in over a year, I don't think, but she's made an effort, and she's dropped a bunch of singles this year, Cupcake has, and she's made an effort in those singles to move away from just kind of being, you know, the sex rapper and to kind of being a more diverse songwriter. I mean, she's always done that in a lot of her stuff. But anyway, I feel like I spend so much time talking about Cupcake because I'm like, she's an artist who deserves to be talked about at length, because what Megan is doing on this record, Megan is very clearly just making a Cupcake record. She's trying to do that sort of thing. And it's like, I don't think that it's, you know, like rip off to the point of like Megan having no originality or anything. Megan is talented. She has great flows and she does have good bars, but it's like, I don't feel like Megan has a distinct personality on this record, and that's really maybe the biggest issue I have with it. The Lil Durk duet Movie has perhaps the least sexy hook on a sex song. Like, it's not even just the hook itself, which is just him saying shake your booty baby over and over and over. It's just the way he says it sounds so creepy.
You physically cannot make a song sexy when you have Lil Durk on it.
It's not as fat as Lil Durk on it. And he's the line that comes after that is shake your boobies. And there is nothing less.
Yeah, you don't.
And he raps it like he raps it like he's a sex offender. Like,
like the song would have been sexier if it was delivered by Lil Dicky.
That's very tragic. And for some reason, like he's rapping on the song, but then when he gets the hook, for some reason, he just goes into that lower register that's so much quieter than everything else he's doing on the song. And it's like, why would you sing the hook quieter than the verses? I don't understand that.
I have a pet theory that she purposefully hired lots of female features who are quite good, and then lots of male features who she could just rap off of the song.
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't even really do that though.
No, there's like one feature that
something
compares to her.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. Don't worry.
It's not like, Big Sean.
Features. I said the female features were good, but every single male feature on this record, she just demolishes out of the
game. Gonna have to put an EQ on this edit, Tyler.
Oh, probably. Anyway,
oh no.
Yeah. So one great feature that is worth shouting out: the song "Freaky Girls" has a great hook from SZA. She crushes it. She adds so much energy that the other hooks on this record, by and large, don't have. I mean, for example, in terms of bad hooks, you only have to look to the song "Body," which the hook is I think just body yaddy 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 yaddy
body yaddy 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 yaddy
yaddy. The song has these porn samples as well that just feel really the way that they're mixed makes them feel kind of like distant and ethereal in a way that's not sexy at all. It's just weirdly creepy. Again, I don't know what the hook process was. I think, and then the song Intercourse. So,
that song.
Intake of breath.
Popcorn is a dance hall artist who has done features on a number of songs over the years and has a great voice and a great sense of charisma. But he's not good on this song.
No.
No.
It's a bad song.
In the house.
It's a bad song. And I don't even have much more to say about it than that I'm disappointed.
August coming in with that hot ice JJ Fish flow.
Yeah, the Big Sean. Okay, so
Oh,
Big Sean and
tie.
2 Chains. The Big Sean and 2 Chains feature track, "Go Crazy." What a title! It should have more energy than it does. But Big Sean is just awful. I want to highlight
Fucking awful.
I want to
So
highlight this
bad.
couplet. Strictly raised by pimpin', not by simpin'. Show no sympathy. But if they hate you for being you, they're not secure in their identity. So basically, what he's doing is talking about how he's this big shot guy who doesn't give a shit about girls, and then says to a girl, "But that if a guy treats her like that, then he's not secure in his identity." He's basically just like contradicts his whole personality in 2 consecutive lines, and it's just
It's almost impressive.
just
I've never seen someone fold in on themselves so efficiently.
and then you have 2 Chains, who is just the way he's mixed on this song is bizarre. His voice is so like grating for some reason. It's just purely a bad mixing decision, and I don't get it. Maybe the worst. I've talked about bad hooks. Probably the worst hook on the record is on the song "Don't Rock Me to Sleep."
Was waiting for that one.
And the reason I know it's the worst hook on the record is that I can remember it, and the fact that I can remember it, and yet it still makes me infuriated. It's just, yeah. It's just, look, I don't want to steal all of the fodder for other people to talk about, so I won't go into it. I do want to say that I think that the record does pick up in the last 3 tracks, which I think are all good. The Savage remix is an oasis by the time you get to it.
Handily the best song on the record.
I think it's one of the best rap songs of the year. WAP obviously deservedly dominated the year, both for what it is and what it represents. But for my money, this is the better track of the 2 because they were compared quite a bit. And this remix form, which adds Beyonce, is just it gives it that extra level that it needed.
Gives it that Beyonce.
Yeah, exactly. She crushes her verse.
Can't go wrong.
But she also kills the ad libs on this track. She has some really funny and funky ad libs that she does in this song is just really kind of there's so much sparkle to it. And also the last 2 tracks of the record I think are pretty good. The beats are more minimal than I would like, but they're not as nondescript as they are earlier in the record. And more importantly, these last 2 tracks are just more purely focused on Megan just spitting. There's a line on Girls in the Hood, I'm gonna make him eat me out while I'm watching anime. And it's maybe the realest that she's ever sounded as a human being. And I dig that. Don't Stop, the closing track, Don't Stop with Young Thug, has an edgier, more dissonant beat, which I think is a nice kind of switch up at this point. Megan switches flows on this song really nicely. It's got a real kind of captivating swing to it. And I think it's honestly probably the best song on the record that isn't Savage. It's also always fun to hear Young Thug on a track, even if I think he has lost some of the wilder edge that he used to have in like 2016, 2017 when he was like really big. I want to hear him really let loose again. He's much more tamed on this track. He basically serves the same role that Lil Durk and DaBaby do earlier in the record, though it has to be said that he's just a much more compelling presence as a rapper than those 2 are. But he's just like not really, he's not hitting the level that he has hit in the past, which is a real shame because I had an expectation that he would deliver just from his name on the feature alone. But anyway, yeah, it's a mixed bag, leaning towards the negative strongly. Yeah, it's a shame.
That's on the note of it being a shame. I would just like to say, because I don't really have much to add here. It's really just more I really take no pleasure in the fact saying that I think this is not good. Because, like Tyler, I do appreciate the place that Megan occupies in the culture right now. And, despite the not that the world needs the opinion of 5 lonely white dorks on this particular
Yeah.
subject, but if I'm going to throw in my 2 cents, it's that like Megan is obviously talented, and the problem here is that she's consistently uh not batting her consistent average, I suppose. Constantly punching out of her weight class, as it were. Really, one of the biggest problems, and I think the biggest evidence here that this is a studio project first, and like an artistic effort second, is the fact that it's 17 tracks long, which
Yeah.
is like, for anyone, that's obscene. Yeah, it's only 15 minutes, but still, that's a lot. And it's not like it's not like this is peppered with skits or anything. It's not. These are songs. And I really think that too. It's just like I just wish she got the chance to like come out and make a project that is fully and consistently her, just because, like Tyler said, this album just, it lacks an identity. It's just sort of like her doing the same thing over and over again. It's like, yeah, she's got a good flow, yeah, she fucking spits, but also there's just a lot of bars here that feel really lazy and feel really like just ill thought out, like and again, as mentioned, all of the features that aren't women are just like, with Young Thug aside, just terrible. The Big Sean feature on Go Crazy is the worst thing. It's so bad. It's so I hate him on everything, and this is the most I've ever hated him. He please go away.
This is what we get for having a good 2 Chainz verse on
on
Out of Sight.
RTJ4.
Yeah. No.
Yep, this is the
Cosmic
price
balance.
we pay.
Yeah, like the thing is about a record like this is with rappers like, I don't know, Lil Durk or DaBaby, like my only encounter with them is when they appear on like a proper rapper's album and as a feature, and I never like them. And
it doesn't exactly give you a good impression of anybody, save for the fact that, like, and even still, it's like you have people like SZA and Beyonce, and it's just like, yeah, of course SZA and Beyonce are good. It's because they're SZA and Beyonce. When are they not? And I think, yeah, it's just, it's too long. It's too consistently thin. I think the production, generally speaking, is just hideously weak. I think like Stock really hit the nail on the head. I mean, this literally is just like,
Sounds
whatever.
Stock. Just sounds stock.
It sounds like someone went onto YouTube and was just like, and that's actually the thing. It's not even like a current, like, this record sounds like it like comes from 2005. There's just all of the production on this just sounds like it comes from a shitty Bling album that everybody forgot.
Here's the thing about this record. This is a 50 Cent album. If it was by a woman.
You've really hit the nail on the head there, Morgan.
That is, I mean, it's tragic.
Yep.
Like you've really.
Megan is clearly more talented than fucking 50 Cent. By the way,
it's better than any 50 Cent album. I mean, what is fucking.
But the way in which you've hit the nail on the head is that. Yes.
Wait,
for
holy shit! Both 50 Cent and Megan wrote songs about being shot. My God.
Oh yeah, that's right.
At least
Damn.
Megan had
Get
the
Rich or Die
decency to
Trying's not good.
Yeah, it's true.
Megan had the decency to not harp on about it for 15 years, but you know.
Well, that's the thing. That's one of the most emotionally,
Good
like, you
time.
can at least tell that she cares on that, and it's just like, and sidebar of just irrespective of everything, just good for her. Fuck Tory Lanez.
No, yeah, I mean,
And I feel bad because I don't want, like, I'm here trashing her album, and she's had such a fucking difficult year after
You know
that, and it
what?
sucks.
Megan-
She deserves a better story. She deserves a better
Sure.
album than this.
Megan wrote one song about it. Tory wrote a whole album about how he.
Oh, fucking hell.
the If I Did It of 2020.
No, it's more like the R. Kelly's "I Admit It"
Yeah.
of 2020.
That is better.
Yeah. No, that is nice.
Ah. Yeah,
And
fuck
Morgan
Tory.
really hit the nail on Morgan really hit the nail on the head comparing him to this album to 50 Cent in that part of why I really hated that Bling era, and I've talked about this before on the pod, is the constant references to sex that completely objectify women. And I don't think this record objectifies women at all, but there is only so much I can want to hear Megan say I want to do it on the dick, and like
See,
in
that's
one
my favorite
chorus.
aspect of this record is the relentless interest in like being sexual like that. It's just that
No,
It's
absolutely.
the closest it comes to having a personality.
I agree, and the thing is, like, I love WAP as a song because it is outrageous to the point of like self-parody, and I think it's really fun. And it knows exactly what it's doing in that respect.
It's Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls in 4
Yeah.
minutes or however long it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Which makes this glitter.
makes it burlesque, really.
Oh.
Oh dear.
But anyway, I don't know who is speaking or going next.
okay,
So they
that's-
can.
I think Jake was still talking
Well,
when I made the.
I was, but the thing is that it's just there's so many limited things to say about this, and again, like I could harp on a lot of the bars here that aren't very good, but like again, she's obviously not taking this super seriously, so I'm going to try and back away and
Oh, he's dead.
it's like
Well,
this is
Oh, there
not
he is.
this is not a product from an art, like I don't feel like I know who or what Megan is or wants as an artist after this. I'm going to still be waiting for that. She's clearly somebody who's talented who I want to pay attention to. Like she released an EP earlier this year that was much better than this. I don't remember what it was called, but I remember enjoying it. It was okay. And I want the moment for her. She deserves better than to just have this rushed studio thing. So I feel bad shitting on it because it's like she clearly had such an awful year and she's talented and I love what she's doing more in theory than in practice to really go after this, but it's just like I can't, like it's bad, but I can't be mad at it. I can't. You know?
I don't have that problem. Here's the thing about this album. It will come as no shock to anyone to learn that were I not doing this podcast, there is not a single plane of existence where I would have listened to this.
Morgan's sitting in his room jamming to Body.
Not a single realm. So I did my best to clear my mind and just listen to things as they came. And it started
They came.
okay. It started all right. I was like, okay, maybe this won't be a miserable experience. And then Crybaby starts after the first 2 tracks. And I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. It's exactly, it's everything I feared. Because I really did not want to come on here and be like, this hip hop album sucks. Here I am. Because there have been like 5 hip hop albums this year. And like, if we're going to have that few, I want to like as many as possible. And thankfully I have. But easily the best thing about this album is just Megan as a presence. I think she has a really strong personality, sort of persona that bleeds through in the spots on the record where she decides to, or her producers decided to let her bleed through. And the other moments on the record are fodder, just useless. Nearly every beat on here sounds canned. It's just, I mean, like garage band type beat. Excuse me, garage band preset type beat.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it just, they're so uninspired and sort of insipid. and just dull, impactless, and that is a problem that stretches on even over to the good parts of the record, I think. But yeah, it's the reason that I am mad at this is because it's so clearly, regardless of how Megan herself feels about it and how the production of it went, regardless of whether it was a studio job or a genuine artistic expression, it sounds like a studio job. So
Yeah.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Good stuff.
I have dunked on this album a lot already, but that is purely because people have made a lot of interesting points critiquing it that I can support. I felt like I could support well. I lean towards liking this album, but it's still a very mixed bag. And I struggle to pick whether it works more often than not or vice versa. Like for a start, like you had the opener, Shots Fired or Circles, that for me, even though both songs have flaws, in general work, or a song like What's New, which is really, really fun. And I think the back half, in the back sort of 5 songs in general on this record, are the strongest 5 songs. But then when you have choices like introducing 3 different tracks with the same shut the fuck up vocal sample that is really, really grating and annoying every time I hear it.
Real hot girl shit.
Or just like, shut the fuck up! Just stop.
I hate that every time. Every time.
And it happens 3 times on the record, and I don't understand. Or you have like the synth line on Sugar Baby, which is one of the most dated things I've ever heard. And like we've talked about whether
2005 type beat.
Exactly. And we talked about whether this album is studio job or not. I feel like WAP was so recent that you could realistically put together an album that, you know, is this sort of high budget and put together and written at like this and that space of time and put it out. I feel like this would almost have to have been made beforehand or started before.
I disagree. This kind of thing feels like it was made in weeks to me.
Right,
anyway.
no, like the production's really cheap, but I feel like Megan has put a lot of time into the writing of it.
Yeah, but a lot of it refers to events that have happened quite recently as well. So that also comes to this kind of stuff would have come out, but it might have come in a more fulsome package if she had been given more time to work on it.
Right. But the point I was more trying to drive at was that whoever said that you can't tell is correct, because it sounds so sort of cheap and thrown together. Whereas like albums are really, really hard to make in any quality. And this also reminds me of, we talked about the featured artists on Intercourse, and the fact that I can't tell if the style he is channeling is authentic, or if I would confuse him for like a Drake patois pastiche, says a lot about the record. And the mixing of his line on Intercourse is so bad. And I don't understand thought process on so many choices on this record. And there are only so many songs where I can listen to beats essentially constructed around a drum, a bass, and very, very strange and quite vocally grating vocal intonations Megan has done. They're just sampled and repeated over and over again. Because that is 80% of the songs on this record. Is any melodic line in the beat is mainly constructed out of quite vocally ugly creations. And when it's not, it's really cheap, like MIDI synths. And there's many good ideas as there are on this record. And as much as I'm going to give this record a positive score, I feel like every time I talk about it, I talk about the negatives more than the positives, because they are so much more glaring and more attention-seeking. And whenever you listen to the record, it's like, when it doesn't work, it's like you are on a vaguely pleasant walk when it's like spitting down, but you're kind of enjoying yourself, and your foot just goes in a pothole and you break your knee. And
Bad
like,
news.
Yeah. So, and it's just like as much as I think this is a positive record, the faults are so much more interesting and attention grabbing. And like whenever I want to talk about it, I want to talk about what's wrong with it because it's just more interesting. And that's just not really very good for a record, I suppose, because it means that your positives are quite boring, and that in itself is a critique, I suppose.
Fair enough. August, your take
Okay.
on the record.
Yeah, well, this album in a word is disposable, as I think the point has been well established. We've often pontificated on the kind of whole no skips stuff, and this is the perfect example of an album where you pick out your like 4 or 5 favorite songs and just skip through all the rest, because the level of sonic cohesion is just so low. I mean, it just all the beats sound stock. I mean, there's some really not bad lines on here. I thought "Shots Fired," the kind of refrain of "Who you taking shots at," had a real. She had Megan had such a great amount of charisma behind that line. She delivered it really well. Of course, Tyler's aforementioned "Support Black Business" line. I thought that line on the track.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I think it was Sugar Baby.
I think so. Also, worth shouting out as well, just on the Shots Fired, something I forgot to mention as well. That song obviously samples "Who Shot Ya" by Biggie's by the Notorious B.I.G. So that was quite a cool piece of sampling.
Yeah, no. But yeah, the tracks here, unlike Aesop Rock's new album, which was clearly intended as an album, even though I found spots on that a little less engaging than other parts, at least everything felt like there was a purpose to where he was arranging things. It felt like an album and not, because this is a mixtape. That's really what this should have been marketed as. It's just a bunch of ideas that are just so random and just not, they don't work well together. It's just like it lacks any real identity. Megan's lyrical game doesn't really give me some kind of deep insight into her. I mean, I can forgive it to a sense because she's very attention grabbing across this project. Yeah, feature-wise, she blows everyone out of the water, bar SZA and Beyonce, as we've already established, who have the notable distinction of being audible, unlike most of the features.
Notable distinction of being audible might be the hardest bar I've heard all day.
Yeah, and one thing I need to bring up. Across this whole album, Megan is just going like, bleh. I don't fucking get it. She's going like, bleh, bleh.
It's like the lead singer of Typo Negative when he goes like, bleh.
Yeah, it's not sexy. It's just like awkwardly placed throughout the songs.
It sounds like that she smelled something really unpleasant and she's just reacting to that.
Yeah, especially like our beloved track Body, where she body yada 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 yada. She, and it all sounds like she just recorded it once and then just continually sampled it throughout the album. It's so bizarre. I don't get it. Like, could you not really? But yeah, I just end up not having much to say about any of the songs. They're just not good or bad enough to really be notable. They're just kind of like, yeah, that happened.
Fair enough.
Yeah, she's got a talent for what she does. It's just, this isn't it.
This ain't it, Chief.
Yeah.
I would just like to say that if you want to listen to an album this year that has a song called Good News and Circles, listen to Circles.
Wow.
By Mac Miller.
Yes, it's much better.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
Substance
this
order?
is just...
Jams in Tea Order. Jake, your 3 favorite tracks in rating.
If you have any.
I do, thankfully. My favorite track handily is the Savage remix featuring Beyonce. Good song. I'd also say I do like Don't Stop featuring Young Thug, and again, probably a song I like more in theory than in practice, but I do enjoy Shots Fired. She sounds adequately venomous on it. If I had to pick a least favorite track that goes to Go Crazy, fuck that song.
Oh, crazy.
Bad. My dad's gone crazy! And this gets a light 4 out of 10.
Yeah. So that's me. Favorites are Shots Fired, Sugar Baby, and Freaky Girl, if only for the SZA feature, which was quite nice. Least favorite would be Intercourse, because why? And this is gonna get just the lightest of like, I don't know, 5s from me. I really don't care to listen to it again, but like whatever. I'm never gonna think about it again, so I can't even pretend I'm really offended by the experience.
The rare Jams and Tea Jake rates something lower than August.
Yeah.
So my favorite tracks were What's New. Let's go with the Savage remix, and let's go with Circles. And my least favorite track was Intercourse, and it's getting a 5.5 from moi.
Okay, no, that is totally fair enough. So my favorite tracks are Circles, Good News, and probably Blue World as well. I'm just kidding.
Good choice though. Good song.
No, my 3 favorite tracks on the Megan Thee Stallion album are I'm just gonna say the last 3 tracks.
Yeah.
Shots Fired, and the other 2. No, not Shots Fired. Savage remix, and the other 2.
Outside is the song, I think. No, Girls in the Hood. My bad.
Girls in the Hood and Don't Stop. That's it. And my least favorite track is the one where she goes ba 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 blah blah blah. If you want to leave, then ba ba. That one.
Good song.
Don't.
No.
No, it's not. It's really
No,
not.
I'm joking. Come on.
It's really bad.
Do you take me at face value when I say these things?
Yes.
So I give Megan Thee Stallion's Good News 5 out of 10.
Neat.
And now
The water hour commences.
Okay. My 3 favorites are Freaky Girls, Savage Remix, and Don't Stop. And my least favorite is Cry Baby. 3.5 out of 10.
Oh.
The exceptionally rare Jake and Morgan give the lowest score.
It's not very good, is it?
No, it's not.
But
It's just not very good, is it?
So that scored a 4.6 out of 10, which is
Hi, David Tennant.
the same
it's
score
just
that we
not a
gave to the 1975, and it is higher than Taylor Swift's Folklore, which got 4.4, and lower than Lamb of God, which got 4.7.
It is
The
a better album than
Swifties are
Folklore.
coming.
Yeah, it's better than Folklore, so I'll give it that.
Okay.
speaking
I
of
don't
albums
feel-
better
I
than
don't-
Folklore.
Well,
Literally
yeah.
anything. No. Now is time to move on and discuss the most interesting album of the week, arguably.
For sure.
I'm hoping
Is
this
it?
will be
I don't think
Is
that's
it
an
arguable?
but I also think as well a great album in my opinion. I'm not going to bury the lead, although it's interesting because it's one of those albums that I listen to it and I think, to me, this is unequivocally great. but it's one of the rare albums where I think that, but also just have no fucking clue what most of you are going to think of it. So I'll give a little bit of context. So the new Liturgy album, this is Liturgy's 5th album. It is an opera. By definition, that is what it is. And that's an interesting, I think, label to consider, because I doubt that, I mean, certainly I know that I don't, but I doubt that any of you either probably give much thought to what opera is, even as a concept. Like, what is an opera? We think of opera in with a very particular kind of like aesthetic connotation. When what Hunter is doing in approaching making an opera record is thinking about opera more as in a conceptual term, in a conceptual framework. So she specifically makes reference to Wagner and Wagner's conception of opera, which was that opera was less about a particular form of media and more about like high concept in the way that you approach a work of art and the creation of a work of art. So what that means is that in the sense you have this kind of sweeping singular narrative that is like a kind of continuous symphonic piece of music, basically, that tells a story from start to finish, where every musical element is directly attached to a specific emotion or a specific development or a specific kind of thing that's being evoked. It's much more point to point in its construction than most kind of music is, and even than in previous sort of liturgy records have been. The approach here, just immediately in terms of composition, is just noticeably different. Yeah, and so there's a very specific story, but I won't go into it just yet, except I'll give a little bit of a basic outline. So basically what the concept of this record is it is an opera attempting to tell the story of the creation of the universe, specifically a creation myth, a very specific creation myth that Hunter herself has written. And it is an attempt to convey that story and convey that sensation of the creation of all things through music. And yeah, basically that's all I'll say for now. And I'll probably save my extended thoughts on this for last, just because I have a lot to say and I don't want to like talk and then everyone is like has no idea what to say because I've said so much. So I'll go last, but I would like to ask that someone who feels like they have a decent amount to say about this record goes first. I don't really care who.
I can do that, maybe.
Okay.
I can try. So I first discovered Liturgy when we last talked about Liturgy, when we talked about the artwork right at the beginning of doing this show. And that listening to the artwork was my real moment of, wow, listening to this podcast is going to introduce me to all kinds of shit. And that was a really beautiful moment for me. And not least because that was around the time I was discovering black metal in general, around the time I listened to Sunbather for the first time. And I really, really loved not just that record, but also Aesthetica and Hack. So I think it's pretty safe to say I was hype for this new record. And I didn't know what they were going to do or what Hunter was going to do. Especially after the comment we got on our last Liturgy episode.
Oh, yeah.
Somewhat of an insight into how the band is running these days.
Yeah, so essentially to summarize for our listeners, the picture that appears to be painted or the way that Liturgy seems to operate is that it's very much conceptually everything is kind of written and driven by Hunter, but at the same time she uses a rotating round table of guest musicians. And it's worth acknowledging as well that this album has by far the most musicians on it of any Liturgy record yet. There's a real dense
and quite
Task
necessarily to get the sound that it's going for, I think. But and like the artwork was like a divergent for the band where they're exploring all these other sort of more synthy MIDI options, more orchestral shit, and maybe some more industrial sounds. And then Hack is more of the next one. It's more of a straight black metal record, and I listened to the first song on this record, and it's an extended woodwind interlude that climaxes in a more black metal sound, which is more sparsely organized on this record. And that it took me a long time to get over the initial shock because I didn't know what to expect. It wasn't this, but then again, I should really have expected for them to surprise me. And that's, I think, going to be my predominant joy with this band going forward, is that whatever I expect from the band, they are not going to do that. And it was only on my last listen where I was making notes for the episode where I was forced to listen to it as a series of tracks and not one homogenous sound, where I understood the pacing a lot better. I really gelled with how each track contrasts with the other one and tells its own story. The first song, Separation of Hack from Hail, which it does have reference to Hunter's mythology, that I looked up a vague cursory knowledge of, and I find interesting. But what I really find compelling is the way the music tells a story across this album specifically, and also the song. At the beginning, it reminded me of some of the work of the Radiophonic Workshop, especially some of their latest work on the movie Possum. If you don't know who they are a musical orchestral group who worked for the BBC for a long time, scoring a lot of their things. And this opening stuff really reminds me of what they did on one of my favorite horror films ever that came out last year called Possum. And I think their score for that is incredible. And I think this extended woodwind interlude is as good. And when you tell me the separation of Hack from Hail, Hack in Kabbalah means the truth. I'm not going to pretend to know any more than that about that mythology because it is dense. But you do get the idea that this is a slow build to a tormented separation of two celestial bodies, as it slowly builds to this black metal climax of screeching guitars. Oyen's birth, which in my darker moments I called Anisian's birth.
Oh, fuck. No. Moving right along.
Yeah, it has this orchestral shit, which it chops electronically and screws with, and it's a sort of very almost like threatening, kind of almost like scary track that channels a lot of horror scores. And then track 3, Lonely Oyoyan, captures this sense of longing and loneliness mixed with hope, as it too builds to an astounding climax. And almost every track on this record has this feeling of whatever the pitch that the title gives you, the song delivers on, especially connecting to previous characters that the song introduces, like Shahim, and it, like in the song The Fall of Shahim, the music almost captures this King Lear-esque sense of tragedy, and it explores so many more musical textures for the band, especially track 5, Shahim's Lament, with its that one.
Yeah.
I think that's a different one.
Gesundheit.
No, it's I sneeze in piano, don't you know?
Yeah, but
who doesn't?
It has these very measured piano lines with wails in the background. It introduces wailing guitars as well, and an almost demented and hellish riff about halfway through. And it really feels like if you want to get a black metal band to write a song that depicts a character cast aside from the world with his sadness and anger, this is a song to do that, and it captures all of the emotions inherent in that mood in its totality. And then you have this character Oyoyan, who's been birthed and then made lonely, almost like Frankenstein's monster, and a Shahim who has seemingly fallen from a great height to be laid low. In this is the framework by which the magnum opus of the album is introduced, the mammoth 14-minute song Apparition of the Eternal Church, which intersperses piano and very proggy guitars and builds towards some kind of absolute transcendent sense of relief and hell at the same time. This song captures in all of its beauty the journey of self-discovery to me, where it takes you through hellish darkness, but also transcendent beauty, which is what I really love about the genre when it gets it right, is that balance of just pushing you so close to the edge that it pushes you into some kind of place of it just takes you to a new plane of musical experience. Yeah, and it does reach some genuinely transcendent places. It can be quite punishing. It is a punishing journey of a song, but it is incredibly rewarding. And we also, after this, have the armistice, which means, I think, a laying down of arms. I don't know what Hunter intended the story to be, but I feel like these two characters have reached a point of revelation within Hunter's mythological religious framework. Also, and I'm also reminded of the philosophy of Alejandro Jodorowsky, who shares a lot of points of comparison philosophically, where he wrote so many stories in both his graphic novel work and his screenplays about frustrated characters who fight against the world, and only when accepting some kind of religious transcendence, they put down the arms that is the guns that they fire at life, that is the confrontation and conflict they have with their own existence. And Jodorowsky in his philosophy also shared a lot of sort of Freudian Kabbalah influences of just spiritual enlightenment that's also drawn from Buddhism. Yeah, so
there's a heavily Marxist bent to it as well that I'll touch on a little bit too. Very strongly influenced as well. As this idea that like I don't want to misrepresent any ideas, but there's like one of the sort of fundamental, I think, tenets is this idea that like a world in which creative expression is entirely free is a utopia.
Which is, Marx wrote a lot about that idea explicitly.
Yeah.
And you also see in a lot, to bring it back to Jodorowsky, in a lot of his stories, especially El Topo and its sequel graphic novels, someone who has rallied against existence, fighting for the freedom of others, and finding religious enlightenment through that process. There's a bit of that in the Holy Mountain as well. Yeah, so it's a wonderful closer with brass and strings mixed with glitches, and it ends on beautiful harps. And what I think, and I have multiple joys with this record. The first one is that it tells the story clearer than any other Liturgy record has for me in the past. The second has sort of given me a sense of narrative cohesion before previously. It's felt like a collection of very interesting ideas, even if I know Hunter, especially on something like Hack, is attempting to give me a cohesive sense of a philosophy. Hack still feels to me like a collection of good songs. This feels like it's a story, that it's an album that needed to be this like musical opera story. My other joy is that it gives Liturgy and music like this in general a whole new toolbox to use in the music they make. It just introduces so many other ideas from different bits of music and brings it in to this central thing. It still feels like a black metal record fundamentally, but it's just bringing in so much other shit, and it builds such a complex palette and could give so many other people who are just starting out on their metal music writing journey other tools to construct even more interesting music with going forward.
Yeah.
I have frustrations with this album. I don't think it always comes together in a very satisfying way, but it is super, super, super interesting, and I'm here for that.
Yeah, I think like I spoke a bit before about like the notion of like what opera is, and I'll touch on a little bit more when I get to my review. But like I feel like even if you don't want to get into that kind of stuff about like a clear definition of it as a concept, I think if you listen to this, you can kind of just feel it.
Yeah, I think this. Knowing what I know about opera, it definitely matches what I know opera to be. If in its own way, I'm not going to say it's a 1-to-1 match, but it feels operatic still.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would like to hear from someone else now. I'm weary. I'm not going to ask individual people. I just someone else who feels like they want to talk about this record. Speak forth.
Sure, I would like to. Well, I mean, I also got into Liturgy when we decided to talk about Liturgy with the artwork. Notably, I was a fan of that album, and I liked Hack a great deal. Even though I'd say I like the albums about the same, even though I think Hack is like the better, more cohesive project. But like I think I did like a write up for that on Music Board, and in it I just sort of said that like while this is great, and while I think that like the production is fantastic, it's this blistering, glitchy electronic, just it blends all of these things super duper well, but it lacks the unwieldy ambition of something like the artwork, where it was a less consistent experience, but it was an experience that felt more, I guess, fully formed to me. And now I've kind of recontextualized it in my head because of this, just because I sort of just saw how those records contrasted as experiences to me, and this sort of, I guess I don't really know what I expected either, but I know what I wanted. And I just sort of said in my initial write up that like in between Hack and the artwork lies my ideal perfect Liturgy album, where it has this unwieldy, ambitious structure, and it plays with all of these ideas, and it's like just constantly throwing shit at you, but it's produced better. It's got more of a better flow to it. It just sounds a bit less maybe jagged. And lo and behold, Origin of the Alimonies is that album. It is like it is operatic. It has this grandeur to it. Like I will be totally upfront. I don't know what the fuck any of this narrative shit is about. I don't. And that's frankly because it's not that I want to say I don't care, but I don't really care. I'm here for the music,
Yeah.
because if I can appreciate something like if I can appreciate the artwork or the artwork at face value, then I feel like I don't really need to have, I don't need to read I don't need to look at Hunter's slideshow, which, I might one day, just because I do want to, like, understanding these albums a little bit further might be cool. But just as a musical experience, on a technical level, I love this fucking thing. I think that this is beautiful. I think it is terrifying. I think it is devastating, and I think it is some of the most engaging passages that Liturgy has put out so far. There is a symphonic quality to this, and that's not to say it's not symphonic black metal. I'm saying the approach to how the songs are structured is in and of itself symphonic. It is not anything like symphonic black metal. Um, it's sort of, it, as Saoirse alluded, sort of begins with these sort of unassuming, like woodwind passages, and then it sort of like has this sort of really abrupt kind of like, whoa, this is what it was building to ending, and then it sort of goes back into a little bit of a lull, and it has those sort of moments where it kind of has you on the edge of your seat, like just kind of waiting for like, oh god, when is this gonna like erupt and explode into one of those like hack style just passages. And like whenever that happens, it always kind of just shakes me in a really exciting and invigorating way. I think that this, on a production level, is the most impressive accomplishment that they've made yet, just because it's got the mirror sheen that Hack does, but it's got way more instrumental variety. It's like, again, Tyler said that there's a lot of musicians on this, and you can tell. I was just sort of surprised of how much of this even really truly sounds like black metal, or I guess the transcendental black metal, just because it's sort of in the longer passages, like in A Partition of the Eternal Church, or The Fall of Seaman. Not going to pretend like I know how to pronounce this, I don't. But there's also just moments that caught me off guard that, like, in a really cool way of, like, I think it's Lonely Oyoyin, that has, like, I think Tyler described it as a trap beat.
That's
Like,
that's Shahiman's Lament.
okay, that's Shahiman's Lament. That is awesome. I was just kind of like, how is this gonna be incorporated? And then when I got to it, I was just like, wow, this has like has a groove to it. I like it. And there's something so bright about this album. Like, again, this has sort of always been a thing with Liturgy. It's just like, oh, is it really black metal, transcendental black metal, this, that, and the other? This, I think, is the closest they've really come into not actually sounding like the genre, and I'm not like a genre purist. I don't care whether or not something falls into a specific category, but this does, to me, sort of feel like the arrival of Liturgy is doing their best to weave in their own subgenre of what they're going for. It's proggy in its structure, and it's dense when it's heavy, but it's also light and airy and mysterious when it's not trying to be, and it's a very effective mood piece. It captures its emotions so beautifully. I feel like there's never a moment where I'm like lost and just like all of these ideas happening and I'm just like, I don't know how to interpret this. I'm always on the same emotional wavelength. And like, yeah, it's got all of the moments that I want in a Liturgy album, where it's blistering and it's punishing and you feel like there's this primordial fucking chaos and explosivity happening, but also there's a deep sense of tranquility here. And I would, I guess, like to know what the narrative is like in a broader sense, just so I can understand maybe the musical journey that this takes you on. But like, it's also 37 minutes. It's quite lean, but it's also very dense. I don't think that there is an insignificant track on here. I also don't really think I could like I have a least favorite track, but it's only in the sense that it's just like I just kind of like the other ones more. I think of it as one giant movement way more than I can
Yeah,
like separate it into
me too.
individual pieces, you know? Like it's just like I can't say like, oh, this is the weakest segment, just because it's like this is all just one big thing to me, and it's weird, and it's fucking like I don't know. It's difficult to describe, and I'm sure that Tyler's breakdown of it is going to be immensely satisfying to listen to. But just as a neat little experience, this is the album from this band that I have been waiting for. It combines everything I like about their last two projects in a way I find very immediately satisfying, but I also, I come back to this album and I'm like, yo, this feels dense enough for me to keep coming back to it, just because like with the arc work I come back to that and I'm just like I always hold this at arm's length, just because it's like I like it more in theory than I do in execution, and then I listen to Hack and I'm like, oh, I like this, but I want this to be used in a more inventive way. And Origin of the Alimonies is the inventive way. It is like theatrical in a very strange way. It's bright, it's beautiful, it's hellish, and I really, really like it.
Very good. That's quite satisfying to hear. All right. Who would like to go next? Morgan or August?
Well,
You spoke
I-
first. You go.
yeah. All right. I was gonna say, yeah. I think it's fine for me to go, but as per usual with the liturgy stuff, I'm not big on the lyrics. I tend to find the individual meaning is of each lyric is not really worth a terrible amount of attention, and I feel a lot of that just comes in the band's name, liturgy, of course referring to religious worship, so it almost feels like to me their lyrics have always felt like just a chant or an extension of a feeling rather than being something
I mean, you're in luck because there's only about 3 of them on this album.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
really, I was thinking.
There's like there's so I struck gold here because the storytelling is primarily instrumental.
Yes.
And I think by that measure, Origin of the Alimonies is one of the group's finest achievements. The first track, of course, the separation of HAQQ from HAEL kind of suggests a direct continuity with their previous effort, a very delicate organ leading the listener into the album. And the tone here is like both triumphant and mournful at the same time, something akin to like I thought of like a king's funeral or something to that extent. Perhaps these two emotions imply two narrators, which I think is most certainly a story element running through this album. The title of Alimony suggesting a separation of kinds. But yeah, so kind of during the last minute, it of course explodes with these with the drums leading the listener into utter chaos and then calming down again. And one really important thing I did end up reading from Liturgy kind of about this from Hunter Hunt Hydrix about this album, and a lot of the track titles that I found interesting, at least worth noting, that being that kind of the words used for the song's titles are not necessarily meant to be pronounced. It's more within Hunter's philosophy, you can have a name that is unpronounceable by human tongue. It's just kind of the feeling of the word that is meant to convey the idea of what's being got across.
It's like
Which
it's like the drone metal band Sun. They have like an
Yeah.
additional non-verbal component to their band name.
Yeah, exactly like that. So you've got Oi Oions, however you say it, birth. And the organ continues here, noticeably bleaker with just a more kind of haunting tone to it. Really, it feels like in an interlude between these two more significant moments on the record, of course, supported by the fact this track is only like a minute and a half long. And then you get the epic lonely, which kind of contrasts which starts with this kind of much more muted organ in contrast to the more loud, full sounding organs from before. And the explosion into Liturgy's brand of black metal here kind of reminds me of just this violent thrashing, kind of like like entering the world for the first time. I think going along with, as Tyler mentioned, the kind of conceptual birth of the universe. I think this being very clearly the genesis point of just this huge creation. And then you've got the fall of S, is kind of this return to this more mournful sound, incorporating a lot of kind of more brass instrumentation, but the tone becoming here more anxiety inducing. The guitars adding added in later to the song with like a subtle glitchiness infused into this, which I found that was one of the most interesting kind of genre kind of twists put into this album, adding like a lot of glitch and hip hop, especially in the next song, S's Lament, which incorporates elements of trap, which is, you know, it's certainly a choice, but I do feel the construction of these two tracks is it kind of gives you this feeling of like an epic downfall over the course of these songs. It's very cool, and the songs here almost seem to be written in pairs, or I guess more not written but composed in pairs.
There
having-
actually one thing I noticed got changed on the Rate Your Music page for this album, and presumably elsewhere as well, is that the opera is actually structured into 3 distinct acts, with an overture, the first track being an overture, and there also being an interlude as well. So there's actually
Okay.
a structure to the that's been superimposed on top of
Okay,
exists.
gotcha. Yeah, no, I think that's certainly, even without knowing that, I think that's certainly a very, very clear in that the structure is just so well defined here. You really get a sense of, you just get a sense of the narrative, even if you don't really notice. Then you've got the of the Eternal Church. It stands as the album's kind of just climax here, going through movement after movement and wave after wave of just pulsating, pulverizing, and pounding metal riffs. It feels like some kind of large battle, harkening back to this kind of idea of duality, I thought, with two sides just it's really, because when I feel I'm talking about this record, I feel I'm talking about things that feel so theoretical and like not defined about it, but yet it all feels like you can get what I'm talking about just because the record does such a good job at kind of conveying this story with only sound and not really many lyrics.
Yeah, like as someone who's heard the album and heard it recently, like everything you're saying makes perfect sense to me. But if I like hadn't heard the album, I would just kind of be like, "What the fuck are all these guys fucking talking about?"
Yeah, no, it's that's exactly the feeling I'm trying to put into words. It's just you get it. You get it. Yeah, it kind of, and yeah, then the record comes to close, of course, with the Armistice, kind of closing out with this pair of verses kind of seemingly screamed at each other, it feels. Like, and the whole thing is just a tight 37 minutes. I mean, Liturgy's, this album manages to be one of, I think the group, not one of, just full period, the group's most focused package of songs to date, with some really, I thought, noticeably fantastic drumming really stood out to me as
Oh yeah.
original. Yeah, and it's just a very typical chaotic, almost cluttered Liturgy sound, and I think Saoirse hit the nail very much on the head when she said there are parts of this album that don't come together as well as other parts, but I feel on the whole it is forgivable enough in the sense that what Liturgy have presented here is just one large epic kind of experience that you just get such a strong emotional core from it. It's just I just think it's pretty cool.
But it's also forgivable in the sense that what they're doing isn't so much that every song needs to be immaculately constructed. What they're doing is we are putting our sword in the ground here. We're putting the gauntlet down and throwing it down and saying, "This is what we're doing. Keep up or else." You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I am personally, my favorite liturgy project stands as the arc work. Just I guess because I feel that record's narrative is even a bit more kind of epic and to a grand scale than this one. Of course, having a longer runtime being quite a big help with that, but I do think if I needed to just sit down and listen to one, this would be a very easy pick.
Mm.
All right.
Review.
Leaves Morgan.
The true wild card.
Yeah, this could go either way.
Yeah.
We remember how the artwork went, don't we, Morgan?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's not an inspiring look.
Oh Christ. Okay. I'm not gonna belabor this. I don't want to harp for too long on this because at a certain point it just becomes raining on everybody's parade.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
I came away from this in the most predictable fashion possible. I didn't fucking like it. And articulating why is so frustrating because I don't think I could articulate why if I really liked it.
I mean, fair.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to do fucking homework to understand what the hell is even happening here. And, you know, cool if that's your bag. If you want to do the homework, then that's great. There's not anything necessarily wrong with that. But there's just nothing about this that I find engaging. Almost nothing. I think the drumming is excellent, but the drumming was excellent on the artwork. So that's not even a surprise at this point. It's just a consistency. I don't know. I feel like this is so difficult to explain because this plays so directly on how you emotionally react to it. And I emotionally reacted negatively almost instantly. And I just feel like the best way I can describe it is I like it more than the artwork. But I also found it more boring. So that doesn't really mean much. And I arrive at the conclusion that this artist is just not for me. And that's fine. I find it like overbearingly pretentious. And that's fine. I love plenty of pretentious stuff. This is just not my pretentiousness. It is not my vibe, and I want very little to do with it.
That's fair.
I appreciate
No,
that.
I get it. I really do.
It's
And
very like honest and fair. So thank you.
And I don't want to harp on it for too long because whenever the word liturgy is said in this podcast, everybody looks at me and goes, "Oh," and I'm like, I get it.
I mean, it's very much like it sucks for you because like there should be no assemblage of people where liking the artwork is the majority. Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
Wait, I mean,
and I'm the one of the people who likes it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I won't lie to you. You're all still better than this. The floor standard is higher, but sometimes it feels like listening to people on film Twitter talk about Miami Vice. I'm like, I feel like I'm being gaslit.
Well, strap in.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
And
I can't wait.
That's wonderful. You all live your truth. Jesus Christ, it's like you're speaking French.
There's Lavon.
As
I
ever,
get it.
Morgan, I appreciate your candor and your honesty. It's very refreshing. In a
No,
world
for
in a world so full of people talking shit all the time, it's very nice to hear some such candor.
Well,
world.
I couldn't exactly get up here and lie because I don't even know how to lie about liking this. I don't. I'm just that far removed from understanding that I couldn't even
Lied,
dream of.
you'd be a poser.
Well, yes, and yet, yes, that is a fact.
Okay, so it's been very interesting for me listening to the takeaways of 4 people. Well, I suppose the takeaways of 3 people from listening to this record without digging into or some of you have dug into the conceptual framework a little bit, but like getting your impressions in terms of like what the music evokes in you without necessarily diving into what was intended. Very interesting to hear that, because like it speaks to a certain extent as to whether the music was successful in evoking what it set out to evoke. And so I already kind of led this from the front by saying that this is a sort of a conceptual opera about the formation of the universe. But before I get into that, I just want to touch on a couple of things that were brought up in other reviews. Specific first thing is like the notion, and we talked about this in the artwork review as well, but the notion of liturgy as black metal, or the notion of like what liturgy do is a variation of black metal. Like they are self-defined transcendental black metal band, but I think that even Hunter would tell you, and if you go back to their earliest stuff and throughout their career, what they do musically is more about they sometimes wear black metal as a style, as an aesthetic, as a part of getting across the ideas they want to get across and creating transcendental music. But they've always kind of experimented with or incorporated other styles of music in every single album that they do to a greater or lesser extent. And I think that still to this day, HAQQ from last year is probably the most focused and consistent and perhaps the most deserving of that transcendental black metal title, alongside Aesthetica. But I think that HAQQ is an even more focused and effective record than that. But there's no denying that Origin of the Alimonies is the most musically diverse record yet. I think one of the most confident Liturgy albums in terms of like Hunter being at a point where she can she's not afraid to go outside of the kind of convention of the where liturgy came from in order to best express a feeling or an idea through music. I also want to touch on what Jake said about like kind of not being interested or not caring about the conceptual background of liturgy records, because my approach to listening to liturgy throughout the years has basically, well, throughout the years, I think I've only been into them for like just over a year. But anyway, my approach has been basically the same. I have not really cared to dig into what the concepts are behind records like HAQQ or the artwork, or if I do dig into them, it's kind of really on the on a more superfluous kind of like surface level. But Origin of the Alimonies, immediately sort of in the lead up to it and in its immediate release, I found myself just completely drawn to wanting to understand what this was doing. And I think maybe it's because it's so structurally unified with its concept. Like it's so like everything it's doing is constantly related to a linear progression narrative. And so that may be why I was so interested in it. But for me, this represents the first kind of major point in Liturgy's discography where it feels like there's a real synthesis, a real tangible synthesis between what they're trying to communicate ideologically or theologically and the music itself. It feels like an arrival for Liturgy as a project to somewhere that Hunter maybe has been trying to get them for a long time, but it's really just here where it feels like something new has been found, it feels like more successful. Even if I like HAQQ as a musical experience more than anything else they've done, this, I think, is the most successful execution of what liturgy has always been trying to do, broadly speaking. So yeah, it is an opera that tells the story of creation. It is called Origin of the Alimonies. It attempts to posit a creation myth about the beginning of the universe that also functions as a metaphorical or perhaps a literal lens through which Hunter can express some of the core tenets of her philosophy, which I won't pretend for a minute to fully understand, but which is called Transcendental Kabbalah, and draws from a whole bunch of different ideological, theological, and philosophical literatures. But basically, this album is intended to evoke the birth of the universe, and specifically the turbulence that occurs in the wake of a fundamental clash between two essential forces, light and darkness. The force of light is represented by a figure with the name, and I've heard this pronounced a number of different ways, but actually I think I heard Hunter herself pronounce it as Olalon. But I think I like August's observation that really it's more a symbol than a word. But anyway, this light is represented by Olalon and darkness represented by Sahaman. Yes. And basically the record is about the ways in which this clash occurs and then resolves itself into a relationship of love and mutuality through the formation of two additional layers of being, Ananon, which is the layer of ideas born from Olalon, and Yulklin, which is the layer of matter born from Sahaman. So basically the origin of the Alimonies are these four characters, concepts, figures that represent basically the fundamental building blocks of the universe: light, darkness, ideas, and matter. The opening track, the separation of HAQQ from HAEL, has a title which refers to the concepts that were diagrammed on the cover of Liturgy's previous record, and again basically refer to the essential components of the universe. This track, I think, is like, in terms of Hunter's creation myth, this is like the equivalent of the Big Bang. This is the beginning. It sets the scene as the origin of all things begins. It utilizes the talented flute playing of Eve Essex to craft this canvas of weirdly beguiling sound through which we witness, through the music, this birth happening. There's an overhanging drone in this track that sounds quite tense, and we wait for over 3 minutes for this drone to resolve. The flute is joined by viola and double bass, which work to kind of increase that tension. They frill a bit and then they glitch into silence before coming back in full force with this incredible wave of those typical sounding liturgy guitars and burst beats. And that moment is essentially the explosion of creation, the beginning of light, basically. And then that kind of, the second track, Olalon's Birth, is a shorter piece that basically attempts to transcribe like the formation of light from this creative burst, basically. Or in simpler terms, the sensation of there having been nothing but now something. And the way that's conveyed is that compared to the opening track, the second track has a little bit more drama in its construction, even though it's basically the same sort of woodwind based thing. It's got a more layered and heavy mix that incorporates more glitch. And also it sees the orchestral instrumentation that was introduced in the opening track sort of starting to pile on top of each other in this track. It evokes a sense of turmoil and hugeness. And then it transitions into the third track, Lonely Olalon, which again, right from the title, is aiming to communicate a sense of profound isolation, incompleteness, the desire for resolution that light and darkness feel in the absence of each other. And you don't have to necessarily think about this narrative in terms of the relationship between light and darkness. You can think about it in terms of the relationship between any kind of binary duality, any kind of set of two things that are in opposition to each other, but seeking to resolve. And so this track attempts to kind of evoke that tension, that that sense of the universe looking to come together, but without the means and the components to do so. It's all heady stuff, it's conceptual shit, whatever. But the reason why I spend time on it is that I think to really convey why the music is so powerful, I think it helps to get a sense of an idea of the emotions that it's seeking to convey. And I think that basically at their core, those emotions that I'm talking about are the same ones that some of you have already talked about. There are definitely hints of the glorious frenzy of HAQQ in the instrumentation on this third track. But to me, this is a liturgy that sounds fuller, huger, and more enormous than ever. The overhanging strings on this track make the entire piece feel urgent and enormous. And the way that it all resolves in the climax is just some truly fucking transcendental black metal. It just feels epic. And even though that's a really kind of cliched and meaningless word, it just feels like the right way to describe what's happening at the end of this track. So from that sense of profound and aching loneliness, you get the fall of Sahaman, which depicts the relationship between light and darkness, or this whatever duality you want to think about it in terms of. So we've emerged so far we've followed the emergence of light all along from the beginning of the universe, its loneliness and its desire to be paired with darkness, its natural counterpart. And here we kind of witness that coupling and also the inevitable destruction of darkness that comes with that kind of coupling. Hunter plays with silence quite deliberately in this string-driven arrangement, and at times this track evokes Penderecki in the way that it uses dissonant plucked string timbres that hang behind the layers of flutes. These scratching noises, I think, represent that tension that emerges from this relationship. That light in all her love ends up destroying darkness. Each part of her that touches it eradicates it by virtue of their inherent opposition. And that's, I think, the poignant element of the concept here. Even if you think that thinking about it in terms of light and dark is just weird and silly, that idea of this kind of coupling where they inherently destroy each other by nature of their being is kind of quite a poignant concept. So basically, if you don't want to get all heady and cosmological, it's a song that tries to convey the feeling of two things being unable to reconcile with each other, being broken and destroyed. The drama of this outcome is communicated through a surging and heavy drone of guitars and strings towards the end of this track, which sounds positively apocalyptic. It evokes a feeling of self-loathing and terror that comes with having unintentionally done damage to the thing that you love. Sahaman's Lament is the most jarring piece on the record. It's notable for the way that it initially incorporates trap hi-hats, auto-tune, vocal layering, and a thumping beat. The auto-tune vocal layering is a particularly interesting detail, I think, because you hear a more kind of conventional singing in the background that's playing over, that's layered on top of those black metal screams, which overwhelm the conventional singing and dominate the vocal mix. And so I think this here is a representation of that clash and the defeat of the previous track. You have these two things that are supposed to be in sync with each other, but one is kind of dominating the other one and destroying it. In this track, particularly in the groove that develops in this track's second half, it feels like you're thrashing around inside the kind of broken mind of this figure, reacting with pure psychological grief against their own consumption. You get what I would only describe as a fucking sickening doom riff in the final minute of this track, which I honestly would never have expected to hear in a liturgy track in a million years. But it adds this kind of sense of tight, interlocking violence to it that brings the piece to a close in a really thrilling way, I think. Then you've got Apparition of the Eternal Church. So it's the most dominating single piece of the record. It takes up over a third of the album's runtime. It's also notably adapted from a composition that already exists by the 20th century French composer Olivier Messiaen. And I think what this track tries to do basically is it conveys the bulk of the narrative. We've watched this kind of this strange relationship between these two opposing forces that are kind of mutually destructive, and this track is basically the resolution of that through the birth of, like I mentioned earlier, the birth of ideas and matter through this chaos. And basically the tension and the destruction conveyed on the previous tracks, I think, is resolved here into a kind of ultimate harmony and fulfillment. This track is a long and multifaceted and shifting piece, but it feels notably more unified than some of the tracks that have come before, which again purposefully feel more fractured. Apparition runs the risk of being entirely unwieldy by virtue of its extreme length and shifting structure. But I think, again, what anchors it is there's these core melodic motifs that are recurrent throughout the piece. And though the structure is inarguably proggy, it feels as a singular whole like one of the most compositionally accomplished and even breathtaking pieces that Hunter has ever recorded. And then Closer, the Armistice, is basically wrapping a bow around the entire project. It's maybe the most compositionally eclectic piece. It attempts to convey a sense of reconciliation, but also a majestic grandeur of the universe in its fully formed state. Now we're in this place where everything is kind of interlocked and working, and you have the conditions for creation to emerge through people. It's this kind of evocation of the utopia that I mentioned briefly that's heavily influenced by Marx, where there's this sense of a relieving of tension and a sense of there being a new canvas from which creation can freely emerge. Hunter's screams on this track sound more defined, elated, ecstatic, and even chilling than I've ever heard them sound before. In fact, they give me goosebumps. The track even adds choral vocals as well, which I think are meant to evoke that kind of arrival of people into this newly formed universe. You get these swelling, digressive string arrangements and drumming that's just out of this world. And it builds this climax of true overwhelming majesty. It's like you're finally overseeing the fully formed universe. And in some senses, this track might be the most definitive, or one of the most definitive and straightforwardly perfect executions of the musical idea of transcendental black metal yet. And it resolves the arc of the opera in quite a satisfying way, I think. So that's a whole bunch of heady bullshit, pretentious, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, absolutely. But that's just what this kind of music is. And like, it's not a new thing. Liturgy's not the first kind of metal band or experimental avant-garde band to try and incorporate heady conceptual shit into their art, but it owns that, and I find it engaging. But also I think another layer to this that goes beyond the kind of birth of the universe shit that I'm actually kind of surprised no one has mentioned yet is that Hunter came out as trans this year, very recently, honestly. And because I've been a fan of the band for a relatively short period of time, it feels like Hunter's coming out happened a lot longer ago than it did. But I mean,
I would say that the reason it didn't come up in like my review is I have always known Hunter as a trans musician. Like,
yeah, I think Tyler is speaking more broadly to the arc of the band.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, because when their last record came out, Hunter hadn't came out as trans, but has since then. So I think that's a notable I'm not saying it's necessarily inherent to the record, but like it is notable that this is the first piece of holistic art that she has produced since coming out as trans. And you've got that album cover where she's revealing herself for the first time on an album cover, nude, basically, as well.
Good for her.
I think it's possible to read the universal birth story that has basically serves as the framework for this record, complete with its narrative turns of these different states of being clashing and resolving, as analogous and as a potentially metaphorical telling of Hunter's own psychological experience with the process of transitioning and with coming to terms with her identity. It is perhaps a loose-fitting analog, and it might be a bit of a reach for this album. I mean, after all, not every piece of art made by a recently transitioned trans person has to be about their transition. But it is also worth noting that Origin of the Alimonies is a multimedia project that is accompanied by a film that I don't think has been released yet, but is written, directed, shot, and edited by and starring Hunter, who, according to the record's press release, uses her evolving body in the wake of her recent gender affirmation as a trans woman as the medium for the story. And she also has spoken quite openly many times on her Twitter account about how the record is, in her mind, both an opera in the about these things that I've talked about, and also subtextually, metatextually about her self-realization as an artist and as a woman. That being something that is braided into the process of its creation, and it is inescapably linked to it. There was actually, she spoke about in the thread that she published, she spoke about how this project, Origin of the Alimonies, has been something that she's been working on in one form or another for half a decade, ever since the artwork. And she actually made a short film version in 2017 in which she played the role of the male character, in which she, and reflecting on that, she talked about how she wore makeup and a flowing robe, and it was kind of this moment of, upon reflection, realizing that actually, there was this state of always sort of feeling like a woman, but not being able to name that or resolve that into what it was until recently. So Origin of the Alimonies is this big operatic concept record about the origin of all things and how the state of the world came to be, and implicitly as well, like a utopian vision about how Hunter would like the world to be, in terms of creation and human expression being this most core tenet of civilization. But it's also this exploration of coming into being yourself, your own kind of birth, your own kind of resolution of a psychological clash that's happening deep within you. And I think that the fact the record works on these different, seemingly unrelated but analogous levels is what makes it so powerful and so satisfying as a project for Liturgy. Like I said early on, this feels like the first time where what Hunter is doing conceptually and what she's doing musically truly feel like fully unified. And that the music is actually complementing the philosophy and the philosophy is complementing the music together. And that's why I think it's a really exciting record for Liturgy as a musical project and for Hunter as an artist. And I'm very excited to see where it goes from here, what the next kind of story is, and the next kind of development of Hunter's own story. And that's why I think it's one of the best records of the year.
Yeah.
Good review.
Good
All
album.
right.
Yeah.
Moving swiftly along.
So should we do favorite tracks, favorites, arias?
Sure. God, that was such a good segment on the album. Like, good job, everyone. Feel well done, team.
I was honestly expecting a But Morgan at the end of that.
No, even Morgan's segment slapped. I'm just
Okay.
like,
Jake, what are your favorite tracks on this record? And what are you
If
gonna rate
I
it?
had to, I'd say that my three favorites are A Portion of the Eternal Church, Seaman's Lament, and The Armistice.
Seaman.
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 Seaman's Lament. And my if
Good
I
one,
had to
Lee.
pick a least favorite, I'd say it is The Fall of Seaman. Still like that, and I give it an emphatic 8 out of 10.
nice. We'd love to see it.
August.
So favorites and least favorites would have to be so of course the apparition of the Eternal Church as one of my favorites. S's Lament, and I will throw in Lonely O. And those are my three favorites. Least favorite would probably be, I will say O's Birth was my personal least favorite. Just a little short, doesn't feel like it has the same overall, impact as the other tracks on here, and I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. Enjoyed it a fair bit.
Nice. Morgan.
Okay.
I did not write down three favorites or a least favorite. The
Not
whole
really
thing is-
relevant here for you.
I
Yeah.
mean, it feels a bit like picking favorite segments of Cassandra Gemini.
Yeah. It's like, yes, my favorite note in this movement by Wagner is like,
Yeah. And on one hand, I didn't like any of it, but I also none of it stuck out as bad enough to mention. So it's no, 4 out of 10.
Fab. Okay. So my favorite.
The world's most dejected. Fab.
That was good. My favorite segments of Vivaldi's Four Seasons are spring, autumn, and winter. And my least favorite is
bitch, what?
It's a joke about the thing you literally just said about choosing segments of a whole such a holistic.
I know.
My favorite piece
No.
by Vivaldi is Spring Sun Winter Dread.
Piece. That joke made me feel older.
Well, now you know how I feel every time you speak.
Yeah. Is it gonna stop me? No.
No, and it shouldn't stop you either, Saoirse. Keep doing it.
Look, I'm just gonna say the reason I make so many bad puns necessarily is because I enjoy watching people be annoyed at them. That's the only reason.
Well, that
That
makes you a
is
sadist.
called sadism.
I gave this rocket
You
an 8 out of 10.
ninny.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, I don't feel particularly compelled to pick favorite tracks for a lot of the reasons stated, but I will say that I think that Apparition of the Eternal Church, start to finish, holy fucking shit.
Oh yeah.
And this is
40,000.
giving this a hearty 8.5.
Let's
Neat.
go.
Alrighty ho, that's a 7.2, which is comparable to Jason Isbell Reunions, which also got that, as did English Settlement. And,
Morgan's about to
Russell
jump off a
Kelly.
cliff.
Part of me just died. It's cool.
And yeah,
And
I guess
Rustin Kelly's Shape of Destroy has a 7.3.
yeah, boy.
Good stuff. All right. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards KG is their 16th album. And notably, it's their first record without founding member Eric Moore, who's also their second drummer. Haha.
Yeah.
It forms a companion piece to their first of 5 albums released in 2017, Flying Microtonal Banana, in that both that album and this one incorporate pieces composed with microtonal tuning. What that means, for anyone who might not know at home, is that they use custom-made guitars built with extra frets in order to be able to play tones that you would not typically find in normal Western tuning. If you think of a piano with 12 distinct notes in each octave, and each of those notes being a semitone apart, microtonal tuning incorporates an additional note in between every two notes, meaning that within an octave there are 24 distinct notes, and at least in this variation of microtonal tuning that King Gizzard used, and each note is half a semitone apart. The result of this might not initially be noticeable to most listeners, and on both this record and on Banana, the band don't use a lot of microtones, but they do use enough for it to be noticeable. And the way in which you might notice it is that it gives the music more of an Eastern feel. These microtonal notes that you don't usually hear in most Western music does tend to crop up in like specifically Middle Eastern music, Persian music, that kind of area. And they do sound strange when they play these microtonal notes as a part of their melodies. But if you focus, you can pick them out on a track like Automation, which is this propulsive 3-minute banger that bursts the album to life. It's also worth noting that the band experiment a little bit more on this record than they have. I know they've definitely got no shyness about jumping from genre to genre between records, at least in what I've observed. But this is a record that feels quite diverse in terms of its genre experimentation within itself. As a result of that, in tandem with the self-titling, this record has the feel of a band attempting to rediscover themselves and find out where they're going to head without their founding member. Thankfully, though, the band are far from short on ideas here. And I have to say, I think this is one of the best sounding and most musically varied in a positive way records I've heard from this band in the best way possible. I love the psychedelic squall of Minimum Brain Size, which evolves out of Automation nicely into this smooth jam with a catchy vocal melody. It's worth noting as well that one thing King Gizzard are great at is structuring their records such that they have a flow from start to finish. And it's particularly impressive how they do that here, considering some of the tonal whiplash you sometimes get between tracks. You get that whiplash, but at the same time, it does feel like the record is flowing. The band explore a more folk-influenced arrangement on the track Straws in the Wind, which is led by these twanging strings and resonant piano chords. And I've noticed this track has been a bit divisive online, but honestly, I like it a lot. I think it's a really good fit for them. I would like to hear more music in this vein from them.
It's the best track on the album. Just saying.
That's a good take. The track Some of Us brings the electric back and has a delightfully proggy feel to the vocal production and melodic progressions, weirdly reminded me at points of the last MGMT album. Ontology has more of that Eastern feel that I talked about, and that's in the first couple tracks. And then you have this interesting experiment, Intrasport, which is the most curious piece of experimentation here. It toys with disco beats, but it also crucially keeps the track squelchy, skronky, and dirty. I could see why this might not work for everyone, but honestly, I think they pull this track off a lot better than they should, considering what it is. I like it quite a bit. Odd Life is one of the best tracks on the record. It's a propulsive piece of proggy fantasy that maintains the dancier energy of Intrasport, but it also throws in some flashy and fun guitar pyrotechnics into the mix as well that makes it feel really just fucking good, for lack of a better word. Honey is a little less successful, though. It has a good sort of busy and bustling arrangement, but it lacks a distinct melody that anchors it. It feels a bit more meandering than I'd like. It's a shame. I don't particularly care for that song, but Closer, The Hungry Wolf of Fate, brings back that acidy skronk from earlier, and it's louder than ever. And I think it makes for a really strong finish to the record. Even if it's not the most sort of conceptually unified King Gizzard album, point to point, this is definitely one of the ones I find myself like consistently engaged with. And like, I appreciate the diversity of it because my attention never really flags while I'm listening to it. So it's a good album.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go next if that's all right with everyone. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So
I nodded my head furiously. So
I saw Morgan doing that, and I appreciate it and respect it. So thank you. So my first King Gizzard record was the last one, Infest the Rat's Nest. That was my Getting On record. Let me tell you, getting into the rest of their albums was a culture shock in the extreme. Considering that is the most explicitly metal influenced record they've done, verging on thrash metal often like a pastiche. I think it's a second best record, and in fact, I tend to like them the best when they do move outside of their usual cultural genre trappings. Like also that year they released Fishing for Fishies, which is one of the most acoustic records, and I think it's incredible. But on records like something like Oddments or Gumboot Soup, where they're just doing the thing that King Gizzard does, unless they're doing it to the level of extreme interestingness on that they do on their classic record Nonagon Infinity or I'm in Your Mind Fuzz, I do tend to gravitate towards it less. And this album somewhat falls between those two stations, and as such, I quite like it. And I think that it contains some of their most musically interesting work. I like the use of microtonality here. What I took as a Middle Eastern sound, I took more to just sort of to be like they are paying their respects to people from other countries who innovated the musical techniques with which they are using here. I love the more dancey feel of Intrasport. I love the acoustic riffs and the groove on a track like Honey. Tyler used acidic to describe the closer, which I think is a wonderful word to use for it. Straws for the Wind. It's not my favorite song on the record, unlike Morgan, but I think it is one of the more atmospheric and stripped back cuts. My only reservation about it is that I feel like it slightly outstays its welcome. I also love tracks 2 and 3, although I feel like they feel like the same track at multiple points to me. But it's a good track, so why fuss? And all over, it is King Gizzard doing what King Gizzard do quite well. Just coming off the back of 2 of their most diverse records, I think I wanted a bit more. I think I wanted them to keep pushing the boat out and trying new things. And this feels like a much more safe record, I think.
Okay. Fair enough. Who wants to jump on that?
fair.
Thank you.
Well, Morgan?
No, I mean, you go ahead. I was just,
Well, I
I
mean,
figured there would be silence like there tends to be.
I like this album. However, I kind of think that their previous effort in microtoning, Flying Microtonal Banana, is a more successful record just because I feel it to be more consistent of a listen, and I liked how they experimented a little bit more with their ideas more on this. Saoirse did kind of allude to this. I do feel like this is kind of a safe record for King Gizzard, which, is fine, just because even safe for King Gizzard is pretty weird by every other band ever's standards.
Yeah, I mean, if your safe includes microtonal tuned guitars, you're doing all right.
Yeah, I do also just tend to like their more garagey, kind of just loud stuff. So this is not the side of King Gizzard that I prefer. That said, I do think it is a good record. I like how occasionally it sort of does this like more Middle Eastern sound, but also kind of like a jazzy kind of thing, like Intrasport specifically. Stuff on Automation just feels like they are hinting at maybe taking their sound a little bit further in ways that I find really interesting and compelling. A lot of the songs are kind of mid-tempo, they do sort of feel the same as the other, so it's really the ones that stick out, like Odd Life, Intrasport, Straws in the Wind, that feel like the album standouts when they actually try to really experiment more like they usually do. And that's when I tend to like it the most. I also tend to like it when they do their proggier stuff, like on something like Odd Life. It's a track with a lot of personality. Probably one of my favorite like Gizzard songs, Odd Life and Intersport specifically. I think the half of the record is definitely my preferred half. With the exception of Honey, I do agree with Tyler. That is a bit of a lull for me that does not completely work. Like on second listen, I was just not really into that song. But like as a whole, I do think it's a good album. I don't really understand the self-titling myself. It just feels a bit more like a venture into an avenue that I feel they've more consistently explored previously. That said, I'm interested to see where they go with it. I don't really see myself returning to this record terribly often, despite me thinking it is a good, consistent listen. I just think that I want a bit more. I just like it when they're a little bit more out there, which I know sounds weird for an album that experiments in microtonality, but it's just it doesn't have that verve, that kind of singularity that their records like Infest the Rat's Nest or Polygon of Wanaland have. And yeah, like I sort of predicted Tyler liking this album just because I'm just like the fact that this is one of my like lesser Gizzard records, I just feel like this is going to be like Tyler and potentially August's more favorite ones, just because this band is so eclectic that if like somebody is just like, I don't really like these but I like these, then the person with opposite sensibilities is obviously gonna be like, well, I don't care for those, but
That
these.
Jeremy Clarkson meme. This is great, but I like this. Except it's
Yeah.
me. It's me with Mind Fuzz and this album.
Yeah.
That's oh wow.
Well, I
But
think we can
before we
definitely
move on,
meet
I
in the middle
just
on
want
Mind Fuzz being good.
Yeah,
I like Mind
totally.
Fuzz a lot.
No,
Hey.
no, Mind Fuzz is still my favorite one, but this is probably my second favorite.
I just want to mention how elated my dad will be that we made a Jeremy Clarkson reference on this show.
Yeah.
Nice.
yeah. I
Top
mean, it's a
Gear
bit like
is
the
done in my house
It is a bit
all
like the
day.
other Jeremy Clarkson meme where it's like, King Gizzard made a record that sounds like a King Gizzard record. Oh no. Anyway,
And on that bombshell,
no, but it is also worth stating we mentioned this is their 16th record. That's in 8 years. That is
Yeah.
just worth highlighting right
Let
out
me
the gate.
do the math there.
no.
That's 2 albums a year average.
Yeah, and they did 5 in 1 year
What?
once.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah,
leaves
you,
August and Morgan.
okay, you're done. August, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can burn through this quickly enough. Yeah, so self-titled albums coming later in careers are always a bit of a worrying sign. See Lamb of God's album from this year, which I know Saoirse and Jake care for, but
I get what you mean though.
yeah.
No,
Now,
not an album worthy of self-titling.
yeah. Now this album, I don't think it's bad, but I don't really love it. I mean, I do like what they're doing with this kind of Anatolian rock style. It allows for a lot of very unique sounding melodies. I mean, in particular, I quite like the production. I think it gives a nice fullness to every instrument on here. It sounds very authentic. The kind of first true song on here is Automation, which I thought was really damn fun. It's kind of deals in this idea of artificial intelligence taking over. As per usual, the lyrical content on a Gizzard album is exceptionally apocalyptic, bleak, and yet manages to be fun. I just find myself feeling that the ground covered on this album, lyrically, instrumentally, it just feels like something they've done before.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just doesn't excite me particularly. Uh, especially when I have Flying Microtonal Banana already, I can just I can go back to that, and it doesn't really aid to the cause of this album's originality. And also just coming right after Infest the Rat's Nest, a very dark conceptual album. This just feels very lacking as a whole. But I did like the song Interest Sport. That was awesome. Don't at me. And
Not wrong.
that's about how I
No
felt.
atin necessary.
Yeah. No, I saw some people didn't like it, and they're wrong.
They are.
Well, this is my first King Gizzard record. Because, you see that somebody has made like 30 albums in the last 5 years, and you're like, all right, I don't know where to start with this. Just kind of move along, listen to something else. But I'm glad I finally sat down and listened to one of these things. And I liked it. I had a good time with it. I feel like it's bad that for a band that plays with the genre so much, that I turned this on and it sounded exactly what I expected a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard record to sound like. That's probably not the greatest sign in the world for this record's uniqueness and longevity, but it's also self-titled, so maybe that's what they were going for. I don't fucking know. I'm much in the Jake and August camp of this is a lot more interesting and exciting when they're sort of going off the beaten path of the album. I find these sort of multiple microtonal tracks to eventually feel a bit superfluous, particularly by the time you get to like Ontology. It's like, this sounds the exact same as something else on here, and I could do without it. But yeah, like I already mentioned, my fucking Straws in the Wind and Intersport and Odd Life and Minimum Brain Size. I enjoyed all of those very, very much. But I can't say as a whole it left very much of an impact on me.
I think I'm very curious. I would be very curious to hear your feelings on something like Infest the Rat's Nest, Morgan. I feel like that
Yeah.
record has you all over it.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say that I
100%.
think Morgan needs to listen to because you said that this is exactly what you expected when you like thought about a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, and you're not like totally wrong to think that, but if you wanted to get more to the core of their sound, I think listening to either In Your Mind Fuzz or Nonagon Infinity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those
Those
are
are
the
good-
two I
Like
would.
Nonagon Infinity
Those are going to be
specifically
my
is just
choices
like,
as well.
hey, do you want to listen to a bunch of really fast, fun garage punk rock songs? Cool.
See,
with,
look,
with
we're
like a load of like psychedelia and a bit of metal thrown in,
Yeah.
you know.
we're already running into the problem is because you've given me 4 records.
Yeah, no,
True.
that's true.
Nonagon
the thing is,
Infinity.
Yeah, Nonagon Infinity is the one you want to go
Infinity.
for.
I've
Final
also been,
answer.
long time considering putting Infest the Rat's Nest as a record club someday. Probably still going to do it. So you will hear that at some point.
That's a pretty good choice for a record club episode, Saoirse. I wouldn't mind. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
it's nice and
It's not
conceptual.
long. It's a conceptual album. It's got a lot going for it. That's not a bad idea. And I love that
Yeah.
album. So
But yeah, so should we move into our favorite tracks and
Yeah.
ratings?
I think so.
Let's do
Let's
it.
start with Toiler.
Okay. My three favorite tracks are Automation, Straws in the Wind, and Odd Life. My least favorite track is Honey, and the record gets a light 8 out of 10 from me.
Okay. Well, one of my 3 favorite tracks is Honey. I apologize for that, but
Why?
Well, yeah, I'm totally offended that you happen to like a song I didn't like. Thank you for your apology.
You motherfucker.
There's a song on here called Fuck Tyler. Yeah, well, actually, Search is like, oh, yeah, well, actually, I'm sorry, Tyler. I actually kind of liked, I think they made some points.
You dumb motherfuckers. I'm going to prison. You know that,
I'm
right?
going to jail. You
You
understand?
let him get away with it in public. I also like Intrasport and Minimum Brain Size, I guess. Do I have a least favorite track? No. It's getting a 7 though.
Okay.
My 3 favorites are the. I keep wanting to call it "I Talk to the Wind," but that's King Crimson because this wasn't confusing enough. Yeah, "Straws in the Wind," "Automation," and "Odd Life" are my 3 favorites.
Odd
Least-
life. Sorry. I was doing a park life bipolar thing. Sorry.
Do not. Do not
I got that,
speak of-
Tyler, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I got it. I get it. It's funny. Damon Albarn. My least favorite is Ontology, and we good?
Yeah.
All right.
Just crying.
Yeah.
6.5 out of 10.
So my
Oh,
favorite
don't
tracks.
me. You gave it a 7.
Yeah.
What are you awing about? We gave it the same rating.
It was an peak expression of
Somehow.
expulsing air. Let's move on.
So
Yeah.
August. my 3 favorite tracks are Automation, Intrasport, and I don't know, I guess fuck. I don't fucking
I love
know.
that song.
God damn it.
Hey, I'll see the 2 of you in hell.
Yeah. Minimum Brain Size. Least favorite, I guess, Odd Life. Don't remember much about it, but this album gets a 6 out of 10 from me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jack the Knee.
All right. My 3 favorite tracks are Odd Life, Intrasport, and Automation. Least favorite track, probably gonna say Some of Us. Didn't particularly care for that. Just kind of sounds like every other song on there. And I give it a 7 out of 10, and would also like to say that there is a music video for Straws in the Wind that is very reminiscent of the music video for the rapping song on Roll the Bones. It looks exactly the same.
What?
I'm not kidding. Look
What have you just said to me?
if you look at it, you will instantly just be like, oh no.
The biggest takeaway that I just took from that was that the rapping song on Roll the Bones has a music video.
It was the lead single.
It was
does.
yes, it was in fact.
It's got a
single.
skeleton.
Oh,
Do you
you've seen
wanna
the
know something-
meme.
Do you want to know something else, lads? So this album just got a 6.9 from us. You want to know what else got a 6.9?
Nice.
The fucking artwork.
The what?
Yeah,
The artwork by Liturgy.
Oh yeah.
funny.
Can't just
Funny
shake it.
stuff.
It's because you people are fucking insane.
I just
All right.
I just searched Rush rapping for whatever reason on YouTube, and the first thing I got was Venom by Eminem.
It's better than
Rush rapping. I get it.
that. Roll the Bones is definitely better than that.
Anyway,
Yep.
And on that note, Rock Over
Yeah.
London.
we're going to talk about what
Chicago.
mention what we're doing next week.
We're gonna talk about Ween.
Talking about Ween.
Well, we're talking about Ween in our record club for today.
Next week we're talking about Tom Waits. Thank you.
No,
And,
yes, but no. Next week we're talking about the Smashing Pumpkins. We're talking about them a lot next week, actually. And
Yeah.
we're also going to be talking about Miley Cyrus's new album, Plastic Tit Hearts.
I can't wait.
So,
I
yeah.
can.
I can.
Let us
Yeah.
know in the comments what you think of either the Liturgy album, the King Gizzard album, or the other one that we reviewed today. And see
The
you
other
next
fucking
week.
one.
See
I
you
don't
next
remember
week.
it. It's the
August,
worst one.
take us away.
Rock Over London. Rock on Chicago. FedEx. When there is no tomorrow.